When did a bad guest in your house deserve the red wedding treatment? Happened to a friend. When we were younger, this kid came over to his house and took a crap and didn't flush or use toilet paper. Then a few weeks later, when my friend went over to his house, he was going to return the favor, but lo and behold, there was already a turd waiting for him there. Friend living in Europe came to the US to visit family. Her husband was here for a couple of weeks but went back to Europe for work while she stayed with us for the summer. Unbeknownst to us, she had stopped taking her medications and started racking up long-distance phone calls to Europe in the middle of the night and early in the morning to talk to her husband. But if she called his office and he wasn't there, she'd just ask to be put on hold until he returned to the office. I received a $3,000 phone bill and realized what had happened. Thankfully, our phone company at the time listened to my story and agreed not only to set us up with an international plan to call Europe cheaply, but they made it retroactive to when she started staying with us. $3,000 became less than $200. This was at my grandmother's funeral. She was a well-known lady, so many people came to her funeral. What happened while we were all grieving was a bunch of people decided to steal a whole bunch of random crap from our home. All our plates, cups, cooking utensils, bags of rice and medicine, all gone. After my mum passed away, her elderly friend came to visit. She asked for wine, she pounded back 4 glasses, then she whipped out a handful of sleeping pills and downed those too. I freaked out. She said she did it all the time. She then proceeded to fall off the chair. She tried going upstairs and started to fall. I caught her and half carried her to bed. I heard her fall hard on the floor. She was laughing and delirious, and was 74 years old by the way. I wanted to call an ambulance, but she flat out refused. I put her back into bed, rinse and repeat 3 times. The next morning I asked if she had other friends she could stay with, and I drove her to them. When I was in high school, I was having a party at my parents' house when they were out of town. My buddy Derek wasn't feeling well and really needed to take a dump. Apparently, all of the bathrooms were occupied at the time of the emergency, so he ran into the garage, pulled his pants down and diarrheaed all over the garage floor. I was at a party and I heard the host yell, "Oh my God, who threw up on my dog?" The dog was a shepherd mix, a bit stout, so he was walking around with a puddle of chuck-up on his back like it was a saddle. No, and if he's like any of the other good boys and girls I know, he was probably just walking around looking perfectly happy about it until he was summoned for washing time. We don't deserve doggos. We have a backup key hidden somewhere outside the house. Once my sister locked herself out while with some friends. So she got the backup key and now her friends knew where that key was hidden. Flash forward some time and we're coming home after going on vacation and we find our house has been broken into. Nothing was stolen, but all of the furniture was flipped upside down. Turns out my sister's friends did it as a prank. In retrospect, it is fairly funny, but my parents flipped out over it. I had a friend that spent the night over at my house when I was 9. She accidentally went number 2 overnight, but instead of going to the bathroom, she just took her undies off and threw them under my bed. After she left, my mum told me my room smelled terrible and she couldn't figure out where it was coming from. Eventually, we found her dirty, poopy undies under my bed. After that, she was no longer allowed to stay over. Eventually, she invited me to her place for a sleepover. Since she only had one bed, we had to share it. I woke up in the middle of the night, soaking wet and freezing cold because she had wet the bed and me with it. I had to lay in that bed all night, just hoping that morning would come soon so I could get up and take a bath. My parents bought a full-size terracotta soldier that they had shipped home when they were visiting China. About a year later, when my parents weren't home, my grandpa painted it solid grey because he thought it looked worn and dated. And that's when Grandpa earned himself a place in the bad retirement home. When I was young, I was in Cub Scouts, and we decided to build all of our Pinewood Derby cars at my house one year. So my whole little crew comes over, including this kinda weird guy named Ricky. After about an hour of building, Ricky goes into the bathroom for like an hour, and then leaves the bathroom, says goodbye without slowing down, and walks out the front door and gets picked up by his dad outside. My dad was kinda like, what the frick? So he goes and looks at the bathroom and gosh darn, there are tiny little brown fingerprints on literally every surface of our bathroom. Like seat, handle, toilet paper, walls, sink handles, soap bar, gosh darn everything. And yes, we had to clean all of that crap up. But Ricky ended up with the nickname Dicky Turdfingers, so joke's on him, I guess. I let a guy I knew from college stay in my house for a few months because he kept whining about how his parents don't let him do anything, and I figured one more person paying rent wouldn't hurt. When he moved out with about a week's notice, I was forced to clean 8 months of splooge stains from the wall where his desk used to be. I was watching my cousin's dog at the time, really cute West Highland White Terrier. I'd made a rainbow cake using food coloring, which is really hard to get off clothes or skin because it just gets stuck. I'm pretty sure you can guess where this is going. Well, while I was sleeping, passed out, my friends dyed my cousin's dog with different food colorings. I was real mad. It wasn't enough that my cousin's parents were picking up the dog the next morning, but they also used my expensive colors and refused to pay for them or the shampoo I needed for the dog. They'd also poured the green liquor on the dog in the hope to dye her with the liquor first. So she was a sticky color mess. The color didn't even wash off properly, so I paid for her next trimming. My cousin and her family were so mad, the color wasn't even the worst thing, it was the liquor. And no, we're not friends anymore. I had a girl who was 6 or 7 pee in my boots. I had a party with 8 friends. After they left, I went to the hall bath and noticed the hand towel was missing. I looked on the floor and noticed the crap smeared into the grout. Then I looked at the toilet and realized the crap was smeared in swirls all over the side of the loo closest to the wall. I don't know what happened and never did find the hand towel. Gross. Years ago, my old housemate's mum came to visit. I'd just done a 14-hour shift in the pub I was working in at the time. I came home to find her in the kitchen, off her face, in her tights, surrounded by broken glass on the floor and eating my cereal from the bag. She'd smashed all of the wine glasses. She was a counsellor for the Tory party as well. Housemate had passed out, so I had to deal with this wreck of a woman who I'd never met before. He was sleeping over, and in the middle of the night, I see this guy punishing the crap out of his meat. I swear this guy sent it to the frickin' Shadow Realm. Years ago, I lived in a mobile home, me and my significant other. To help with the bills and rent, we took in a guy as a roommate short-term. It was supposed to be for a week. It was my neighbor's father. I should have figured out right there when he didn't let his dad stay with him. Day 1, set up a computer in his room. That's cool, play World of Warcraft or whatever you do. Nope, he was watching cam girls at high volume. Day 2, I come home to my door locked. My key isn't working. This guy had the audacity to change my locks while I was at work. He said he didn't feel safe. Day 3, had friends over for a barbecue. We all worked at the same fast food restaurant that may or may not serve tacos. The store manager closed on Tuesdays. We were off as a group. Every Tuesday we'd eat and drink, stuff like that. So our roommate brings some chick home without giving us a heads up, and they are doing the deed, in his room with the bedroom door open. I'm walking my buddy's 3-year-old son to the bathroom as he didn't want to go alone, and that's when we saw him. Seriously, now I don't even invite people to my house. Meet me somewhere. Nobody is coming over. Drunk friend threw up on my couch and floor, made a real messy attempt to clean it with some paper towels, and then just left without saying anything while I was asleep in my room. I woke up to find chunks everywhere. My girlfriend's old friend was in town, so he stayed with us. I already didn't trust him because he was a terrible alcoholic and was known to steal things. He stayed in her room and she slept in mine. I woke up at 8:30 and he was just gone. He had peed the bed, stole a vinyl of Elvis Presley's Moody Blue album from her wall, that was a limited edition black pressing, and we never heard from him again. He died a couple of months ago from a smack overdose. There was this kid who lived around the block who'd come over sometimes. Well, one day he found some lemonade mix and decided the best thing to do with it was dump it all on the ground and use the sink nozzle to get the floor wet and turn the kitchen into a skating rink. Why the lemonade mix was necessary, I have no idea, but that was a really fun day until my parents came home. I did a very similar thing at a friend's house when we were kids. The difference being that it was the baby oil on the bathroom floor to make the skating rink. I convinced my friend that it was a good idea on 2 separate occasions. I mean, for that second time, your friend really only had himself to blame for getting in trouble with his parents and any injuries he incurred. I mean, you've got to learn from your mistakes there. Almost every time my mum came to my house, she did something messed up. She'd break things or decide something needed fixing up and call up whatever repair or service person was needed and then just present me with the bill when I came home from work. She flooded my kitchen once, which leaked out all over my living room and warped my hardwood floors. I came home once and she had repainted my kitchen. But the worst was that she left candles burning and we woke up to my living room in flames. Almost killed us both. I live in Asia now, in a small studio apartment. So even when she comes to Asia, which has only happened once so far, she can't stay in my home. Your mom should test software. Making things break is required in that occupation. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. A girl came over during a party. She'd obviously had a few drinks. First, she tried making out with me, which I'm generally in favor of, but she was trashed and could hardly walk, so we set her on a couch. She didn't stay there though. She took one of the hockey sweaters that I hang on the wall, put it on, and sat on the floor, banging her hands and singing to whatever song was on. It was obnoxious, but harmless, and thankfully she stopped, because a few minutes later she threw up all over my sweater, herself, and the floor. Not great. We got her to the bathroom, where she promptly passed out, which is generally a good spot to do so, except when it's 10 PM and people are still coming over, and there's one bathroom in the place. We eventually just unlocked the door, found her sleeping undressed in the bathtub, in her own throw-up, happy as heck and thanking us for inviting her. We left her there, drew the shower curtain, and she either passed out or got to hear everyone pee for the night. She woke up at around 4 AM, climbed into my bed where I was blissfully sleeping, keyword being was. I had to call her a cab and pay him up front because shockingly she lost everything she owned in someone's car. Then I got to throw my sheets and blankets in the laundry and sleep on the couch. We are still friends, she's apologized plenty, but that was not a good night for her. My mum stayed with me for a week when my daughter was born. Here is a list. She broke my toilet seat exercising, stole a bunch of my liquor despite being told as an alcoholic she was not to drink in my house, went through my medicine cabinet and stole my meds, went through my financial documents, repeatedly went first for food and took all of the good yet limited items, opened several items that I was going to return, and this was on top of all the general negativity and pessimism. At the end, it was just awful having her here for everyone involved, and she really isn't welcome to stay again. I had a house party in college that was broken up by the cops. When the red and blue lights started flashing into the windows of my bedroom, where myself and probably 5 or 6 other people were partaking in illicit substances, this chick who I don't know just dashed out of my room in a panic. She returns in an instant with a jar of peanut butter and begins mushing her gosh darn fingers into it and shoveling huge globs down her gullet. At this point, kinda high on the stuff we'd been taking, I vividly remember yelling in a manner that reminds me of Jesse from Breaking Bad, "What the frick, yo?" She can barely open her mouth or use her tongue because her crap is so covered in my frickin' food, as she explains to the whole crowd that eating peanut butter will beat a breathalyzer test, before tearing out back into the night. I never saw her again. The cops were super nice, they just ask everyone to leave, and I wake up the next morning, which is when I see it. This peanut butter witch cleaned her grody little claws all over my frickin' walls on her way out the house. There are streaks of peanut butter down the hall, down the stairwell, and all over my gosh darn couch by the front door, where my pillaged jar of peanut butter lay like a cowering victim by the welcome mat. I'm still betrayed. I had a house guest who was fairly tall turn the shower head around to bounce the water off the drywall and ceiling to get the water to fall on his head. He has not been invited back. Okay, so this one time I had a best buddy from elementary and middle school come down to visit me from out of state. Awesome dude. Love having him around whenever I can. We went to visit my brother at his college dorm for some parties. My friend and I are both 21 and 22 at this point. My brother and his friends are 18 to 19. We hit the bars downtown, get rip-roared, and proceed to walk back to the dorms to crash on various couches. I stayed up until about 5 AM hanging out with one of the roommates because we'd had vodka Red Bull and sleep wasn't going to be possible for a bit. At right around 4:45 we hear running water from the kitchen and both wondered what was up. As we walk into the kitchen, we see out-of-state friend sleepily standing in front of the open refrigerator, taking a pee all over everything in there. I mean all over everything, full spray. My brother's roommate and I are both simultaneously asking, "But why?" Out-of-state friend says, "You wanna suck it?" and then goes unconscious. By far the worst thing anyone has done to anybody's place that I've seen personally. In his defense, out-of-state friend replaced everything in the fridge and cleaned it out to the extreme before everyone else woke up the next day. Probably ended up cleaner than it had been in years. All of my brother's friends say it's one of their favorite stories from college. I was the guest at my sister's house. We were getting really drunk with her, her husband, and her husband's friend. I needed to pee and her husband told me to go pee in the bush behind his garage. So I stumbled over there and whipped out my junk and began to take the longest whiz of my life. About 4 seconds in, I heard a sound coming towards me. It was my sister's big, dumb, beautiful golden retriever. Jasper, the dog, is a real attention hussy. Apparently he wanted to get my attention while I was peeing, so he ran under the stream and tried to roll around in it. I pinched off the stream at great personal peril and spun around 180 degrees and let the stream go. Jasper thought this was a new game. He ran around me and started playing in the stream again. In my drunken state, I started to aim off to the sides, but Jasper was not as drunk as I was. He reacted to my evasive maneuvers much quicker than I expected. He bit at the stream and frolicked in it until my bladder was fully empty. Then, with a big dumb grin on his face, Jasper ran back to my sister. I had to follow him and tell everyone not to touch the dog because he'd just been playing water sports. My brother-in-law's friend laughed so hard he nearly fell in the fire pit. The dog got bathed and couldn't have been happier. My sister was mortified. Her husband thought it was hilarious. Was he a golden shower retriever? Well, the person who made that last play on words was as awful a human being as they are funny, but really, there's no way anyone could blame you for that dog's actions. I mean, really, asking a drunk adult of a certain age to cut off midstream is an impossible request. When I was a kid, me and my friends were over at a birthday party. We were playing hide and seek, and one of the kids peed in the kitchen sink because he had to go, but didn't want to reveal his location. None of us knew about it at the time, but later my parents got a phone call asking if I did it. My dad sat me down and asked me straight up. I looked at him like he had 3 heads and said, "No, I'm not 5. Then he laughed his butt off at the idea of some middle schooler whizzing in someone's kitchen sink. Surfed naughty movies on my PC and got it infected with malware. I have to assume he also cranked it at my desk. I stopped hanging out with him when he decided to casually shoplift some stupid thing when we were at the mall. No way am I going to get caught up in any legal crap because of his dumb butt. A former friend stayed the weekend with her kids. She left a potty chair filled with pee in the room where they were staying, flashed her chest at my husband, didn't feed her children breakfast, and the worst, she grabbed my cat's tail and pulled her across the floor. She got up at 3 a.m. on a frickin' Wednesday and proceeded to make a special stew. Special stew was literally every single meat from our freezer, water, and ketchup. Oh, and not to mention she sobbed loudly while doing this. Also broke 3 knives trying to chop a frozen ham. Screw you, Leanne. I'd also like to give an honorable mention to the guest that tried to kill my cat. Screw you guys too, Josh and Weslin. What kind of people do you hang out with? My little brother is autistic. Naturally, when there was another kid with autism who came into the neighborhood for a block party, we invited him over. They had fun, seemed like a cool kid. He asked to use our bathroom. We said, sure, of course. He was in there for about half an hour, and then he suddenly scurried out of the house and ran off somewhere. When my mum went in next, she found the walls covered in finger-painted brown. All of our white towels were covered in brownish-green streaks, and there were brown stains all over the sink tops and the rugs on the floor. But the rug was upside down. Flip over the rug and it was even more covered in that stuff. It was incredible. We bleach-bombed the place with my mum, and I never saw that kid again. They took a picture of my BV medicine and posted it on Twitter. BV is like a yeast infection but with bacteria, and it's not a transmitted disease. They let their kid go number 2 on my deck and then didn't use bleach to clean it, and then argued with me when I used bleach to clean it, and then got offended that I argued with them about the cleanliness of their kid's number 2. Their anti-vaccination stance should have tipped me off. My brother-in-law came to stay at my flat and brought his friend who didn't like dogs and was allergic to them. No problem, although I told him this was the dog's home and he'd have to live with it, but I'd try and keep the dog away from him as much as I could. I was in the kitchen and I heard him saying, "Fudge off, no, go away." So I guessed the dog was doing that thing that dogs do when faced with someone who doesn't like dogs, not leave them alone. I started to go into the front room to grab the dog and I heard a heavy thunk sound and my dog yelped and scooted past me. The mother fricker had kicked my dog. I grabbed him by the front of his shirt, dragged him to the front door, threw him out and told him he wasn't welcome in my home. The butthole kept the faucet running overnight in a plugged-up drain. The drain was plugged because it had been cleaned by the owner earlier in the day. We woke up to see water pouring through the light fixtures in the basement. The owners were my parents, and the guest was me. That moron stole my oven door. Cousin of an ex got drunk and took a bunch of pills, then diarrheaed herself all over my couch after we'd all gone to sleep. Tried to clean herself by going to the bathroom. Then when that bathroom was too contaminated with fecal matter all over the toilet and all in the sink almost to the point of being clogged, she went to my other bathroom to clean herself off. It was everywhere. Walls, shower curtains, sinks and door handles. She woke me up and said there was an emergency. I got up and drove her to her car before I discovered anything from the literal crap storm. You might say that was the crappiest day of my life. What contenders have you seen for the world's stupidest criminal? My old roommate's a cop. He came home to tell me an ATM was robbed after hours for $15,240. The next day, the man who robbed the ATM deposited $15,240 into his personal account at the bank he robbed the night prior. I'll believe it, people are stupid as hell. There was this kid at my university the first year I was there. He ended up stealing a few books from the bookstore, so about $800 worth of stuff. Later the same day, he tried to sell them back to the bookstore that he stole them from. Yeah, it didn't end too well for him either. My mum's cousin was a bank robber. The time he got caught, he went into a bank, scoped the place out, left to go back to his bike — this motherfricker robbed banks on a frickin' bicycle — put the mask on, robbed the bank. The police see the tape, see that the bank robber was wearing the exact same clothes as the guy who left less than a minute before, and that was that. My ex stole a car and went to pick up his friend at the police station in said stolen vehicle. He parked right in front of a cop. The cop ran the plates and escorted him into the building. The next day, he was on the news as the most stupid criminal in town. A lot of people are asking me why I dated him. Well, he never told me that, to be fair. One day I decided to Google his name and I found the article. Learn from me, ladies and gentlemen. Google your partner's names. You never know what they're hiding. And yes, best thing I did was break up with him. Mistakes were made. Every day I see a big black SUV with sheriff written on the side parked in the driveway across the street. I don't know if the guy is the sheriff or works for them, but one night I woke up to a dozen sirens outside. Turns out some idiot tried breaking into Sheriff Dude's house while he was home, and his vehicle was right frickin' there. I knew a guy who got busted selling Mary J. He went to his hearing at the court and went through the metal detector with an Altoid tin full of E in his pocket. It set off the detector, sheriff's deputies searched him, found the pills, and arrested him on the spot. Look, criminals, I don't really want to tell you how to do your job, but it feels like this was such a no-brainer. If you really need to have your special treats the second you finish your trial, surely you can just leave it in your glove box. Were you planning on popping that in front of judge, lawyers, and bailiffs? A professor I had was a retired police detective. He told us about an armed robbery at a dry cleaner's in a bad part of town. When the robbers looked away, the cleaner's owner took the opportunity to grab a weapon and disarm the robber. The robber turned and ran, misjudged, and went through the glass door. Police arrived on scene and noted, among the shards of broken glass on the cleaner's floor, a hunk of something flesh-colored. It turned out to be a piece of human ear. Detective retrieves the hunk of ear and goes to the county's hospital emergency room. Shortly after the detective arrives at the ER, a man who matches the robber's description walks in, holding a towel to the side of his head. Detective asks to look and sees that a hunk of the man's ear had been cut off. Detective holds up the piece of ear he retrieved from the crime scene, and sure enough, it's a perfect fit. He places the man under arrest and waits while the ER doc sews the hunk back onto the arrestee's ear. He asks, "Why on earth did you decide to rob a dry cleaner's of all places?" And the arrestee replies, "I've been watching that dry cleaner's for a while. I'm sure they've taken a lot of cash. I noticed that there's an armored car there twice a day." The detective explains, "Yes, the armored car is there every morning to drop off police uniforms for dry cleaning and returns every afternoon to pick them up after they've been cleaned." Took a vehicle burglary report where the victim found a driver's license on her driver's seat that the suspect must have left behind. It seems damning, but if he had any criminal smarts, he'd just say his license was stolen and the thief would have dropped it while breaking into his new victim's vehicle. Without any other evidence, the case would have gone nowhere. The next day, I take a report at a church that was a couple of blocks away from the vehicle burglary. This guy stole the video cameras from the building. He must have thought the footage came with the camera because when we checked the video, there was a high-def close-up of the suspect's face as he removed the camera. Good evidence, sure, but I still didn't know who the guy was until I looked at the license I collected the day prior and saw that it was the exact same guy. My dad's a cop, and I remember that he called me one night and said he wanted to tell me how glad he was that I'm not as stupid as the guy he'd just arrested that night. An idiot high schooler was caught stealing booze after his fake ID was rejected. His fake ID said he was born in 2001, 3 years younger than he actually was. The poor guy couldn't work out why his ID didn't work. My dad recommended that he pay better attention in math class. I'm a 911 dispatcher in Florida. Sometimes confused or drunk people knock on the wrong door or try to get into a house thinking it's theirs, but it isn't. It's an honest mistake, but the homeowner is rightfully very afraid, thinking that they're about to be robbed or worse. Well, I had this kid, must have been in his early 20s and clearly on something, calling me going absolutely crazy that someone was trying to kill him and take his property and commit the unspeakable act on his girlfriend, etc. I send units code 3 to this guy thinking it's a burglary in progress. Turns out the guy just ordered a pizza and forgot about it. We scared the delivery guy half to death. Worked as a surveillance contractor and was asked to find footage of a copper heist. They'd been ripping all the external piping from old school buildings. It was crappy CCTV and at night, so not much hope of identification. A couple of cameras were offline, so I went back to check why. Turns out they came back a second night and ran out of copper to steal. Perfect face shots of the guy jimmying it from the front. He had his t-shirt pulled up over his face, and he'd quickly pull it back up as it fell off constantly. At one point, he yanked the cam down to reveal his partner being used as a stepladder. When Thief 1 got tuckered out, they swapped, and Thief 2 did the same thing. The constable took one look and was like, "Oh yeah, I know them. I'll go pick them up now." One of my finest moments was when I drunkenly gave a cop a fake ID and then said, "Oh wait, can I have that one back?" And he was like, "That one?" No. Can't go into too much detail, but one youth shot another in the leg after a fight in their apartment complex. The victim was able to describe the weapon the shooter used in detail. We got the perp's name from another kid who knows him from school. My partner looks up his Instagram and wouldn't you know it, there he is posing with the weapon described to us exactly. Social media is a treasure trove of wannabe gangsters incriminating themselves. Went to a job of 2 males attempting to break into a car. Job description said that they'd been at it for at least an hour. Got there, and the car was theirs. They'd apparently locked themselves out. Checks confirmed it did indeed belong to one of their mums. On their person was stolen mail and heaps of phones and new stuff in boxes in the car, so they got arrested for theft anyway. It ended up that the driver's door they'd been trying to break into was the only locked door out of the 4. It was unlocked everywhere else the whole time they were there. Mail turned out to be junk mail and 1 wedding invitation. Well, yes. I was about to say that you can't necessarily be blamed for being caught in an incidental search of their person, but those final details definitely launched these lads into the stupid criminal semi-finals. Well done, guys. A few more heists like this and you could take home the grand prize. Teen gets fired from Red Lobster, returns to rob same restaurant that night. They refuse to give him money from the register, so he grabs the charity coin box, muscular dystrophy or something like that, and then he leaves on a bicycle. I left to go find him and saw coins scattered about, followed the trail off some time which leads me to him hiding in the bushes at a church. Bicycle was leaning up against the bush that he was in. Oh, from my local newspaper. 2 young men in a pickup truck on a back road stopped a courting Amish couple in a buggy and told the couple to give them all of their money. Spoiler alert, the Amish generally don't have money. They do have good memories though and told the cops the license plate number. The inept criminals were locals too and should have known better than to try and rob the Amish. The Amish are not to be trifled with, see? They can and will aggressively hand-carve you a set of high-quality table and chairs. They can also weld like no one's business. Beware the Amish. We had an inmate that would constantly call Crime Stoppers on his contraband cell phone and try to get them to give him the reward if he confessed to his crimes. He did this several times a month. I'm not a cop myself, but about 10 years ago I got held up and robbed by a group of 3 guys with knives. All they wanted was the money in my wallet, so me being the smart guy not wanting to mess with knives just obliged. At the end of the ordeal, he put the knife to my throat and said, "If you ever tell the cops my name is," and gave me his name, "I'll slice your throat right now." So I went home, called the cops, told him where it happened and gave them the name the guy told me. The name instantly rung a bell with them since the guy had come into contact with the police in the past. The cops went to the spot where I was robbed, and they were laying an ambush for a new guy to appear. They could instantly identify the guy, he was arrested, and that's about it. It happened in the Netherlands. I don't know his sentence or anything. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I went to a domestic violence call where the woman claimed her husband had hit her. When I asked her how it happened, she told me he couldn't provide the kind of life she wanted him to give her. She stated since he had had a heart attack and got lupus, he wasn't working, so she decided she'd start inviting some friends over to do the deed with her for money. Mind you, she's telling me, a fully uniformed officer, all of this. She says he should act as the person who handles the money for her, i.e. her pimp. She then calls someone to come over and tells her husband that after she gets paid for the act, he should hold the guy at knife point and take the rest of his money. She said he refused to help her with this, so they got into an argument. He pushed past her to get out of the apartment. She claimed that was the attack that she had called me for. I asked her if she understood she had just admitted to planning a felony crime. She looked shocked that planning a working girl and robbery was wrong at all, and didn't get why I wasn't arresting her husband for trying to remove himself from her stupid plan to get them both arrested. For all of those asking if I arrested her, I did not. The husband is the real hero here. Due to him refusing to be involved in anything, this plan of hers never actually made it off the ground. If the victim had actually been invited over, I could have arrested her for an offense. I did write a report and passed it along to the robbery and vice units, as well as notifying my supervisors. Best I could do that night was separating them. I drove the husband across town to remove him from the situation. The penal code in each state differs slightly on what charges are considered arrestable while still in the planning stages. This wasn't something I could arrest on, mainly due to not having a direct victim I could point to. Basically, because this was a what-if scenario, it would be the equivalent of me mumbling to myself I should punch that guy in the face. If someone had been invited over or I'd gotten a name for the possible victim, I could have arrested her for it then. In short, being stupid and making stupid plans isn't a crime. Crimes require victims. My buddy is a cop and told me about this one kid in particular he dealt with for years. No cleverness to him, numerous times he walked into his neighbor's garage in broad daylight and just stole his bike. Constantly stole from stores in plain view, even the occasional minor attack or burglary. He always got caught. Like never had gotten away with any of his hundreds of crimes, but because he was a minor, there were never any real repercussions. A few days before he turned 18, my friend and another officer went to his house to basically remind him that if he did anything after that, he'll face real punishment as an adult and he'll get 0 breaks. It was a last-ditch effort to be helpful. 2 days after his 18th birthday, he was caught committing an armed robbery. Pretty sure he's doing a few decades behind bars now. Not a cop, but worked at a 7-Eleven in a rough part of Chicago. Had 2 guys come in and ask for 2 bottles of Grey Goose. I asked for their IDs and they handed them over, and I grabbed the 2 bottles from behind the counter to ring them up. They proceeded to grab the bottles and book it out of there, leaving their IDs on the counter. I just called the police, they came in asking for a description of the thieves, and I handed them the IDs. The cops were in disbelief at the stupidity, left and went to the address of one of the IDs that was about 2 blocks away. About 15 minutes later, they walked in with the 2 guys and bottles of Grey Goose. The poor guys didn't even have the chance to open them. I confirmed it was them, didn't press charges, took the bottles of Grey Goose back, and went on with my overnight shift. Oh, sweet boys. Some people are too stupid to take seriously even when they try really criminal stuff. I have to imagine that they were shuffling their feet and looking at the floor like 9-year-olds caught sneaking around after bedtime. I got a call a couple of years ago to a lady who said she was being threatened. I respond to a very rural area, and she shows me her cell phone, and it's a chain mail text from an unknown caller. The message showed a picture of a girl with a gag in her mouth, and she's looking at the camera and holding a sign with both hands that said, "Help." The text of the message stated she was in Amsterdam, and if she didn't forward the text to 10 people, look what happened to this other girl who didn't. I explained to this lady that it was a hoax and explained what a chainmail message is. She refused to believe me and became argumentative. When I offered to contact Interpol for her, she didn't know what that was, and that wasn't good enough, and just kept saying the girl needed help. I asked her if she knew the girl, and she said no, and believed that the girl tried to send her the message using any made-up numbers she could, instead of contacting anybody she knew. My reasoning was once again shot down, and she said again that the girl just needed her help. I remember driving away and the lady screaming at me that I needed to help that girl, and I responded with a single no over my PA as I quickly sped away. Neither of those women were ever heard from again. Forward this video on to 10 people. So I was sitting at the station doing paperwork. Looking out the window, and a few yards away is a bus stop. A young lad is smashing the glass of the bus stop as a way of showing off to a couple of girls. So I sigh, walk about 20 yards over to him, and arrest him. Another time, a lad had just broken into a pharmacy and stolen some substances, sleeping tablets, which he'd started taking, maybe to hide the evidence. Who knows how these people's minds work? There's a foot chase which gets slower and slower and slower, and I ended up just slowly walking up behind him. The guy fell asleep while I was booking him in. Once, when I went to the grocery store, there were a few officers inside getting statements from some of the staff. Apparently some guy had dropped a gallon-sized Ziploc bag full of smack right on the floor while he was walking out. Staff members noticed it right away and called the cops, right before the guy came back into the store demanding that the staff return his smack. He was still arguing with and threatening them when the police walked in the door. There was a kid who sold substances on the floor of my college dorm who wasn't the brightest. One night he was driving back to the dorm and a cop car came up behind him and turned on their lights. This idiot stored all of his stuff in his car and assumed they were pulling him over for possession. He proceeded to drive through a red light and pulled into the dorm parking lot to hide. Mind you, his car was covered in bumper stickers, had a kayak rack, and a vanity plate to top it all off. The parking lot only had one entrance and exit too. Apparently he thought the police car wouldn't go through a red light to follow him. Long story short, they were just going to warn him for having a taillight out and nothing more. Instead, he ended up in a local jail and expelled from the college. The funniest part is that his ledger of all transactions and the dollar amounts, his products and buyers, was right there in his car. He was one stupid criminal. Ex-police officer here. I pulled over a guy for having a brake light out. Nothing serious. Ran his plates and the likes. It all came back clean and nothing seemed off until he exclaimed, "I haven't had any alcohol," in an over-enthusiastic tone. For some reason, he just thought saying this was a good idea. So, nearly got away with it. Vodka doesn't smell. I breathalyzed him, and the legal limit in England is 35. He blew over 60, arrested on the spot, and his vehicle was towed. Idiot. My father is a police officer. He once told me a story of a call he went to for reports of a man and woman fighting in an apartment. The call came from neighbors for noise complaints and concern. He was third shift, so this was at some point very late at night when all the crazy people were up and at him. When he arrived, he could hear the yelling through the door. He knocked and let them know it was the police. There was immediate silence and a man answered the door completely undressed. The exposed man didn't even give my dad a chance to speak or ask questions. The first thing he said was, "I don't have a knife behind my back." Well, he definitely did have a knife behind his back, and the woman he was with had smack, which is what they were fighting over. They both got arrested that night. Pro tip, don't do illegal substances, and if you do, don't answer the door for the cops. As a teacher, I remember asking a student who was looking a bit out of it what was up. Sleepily, she replies, "Didn't get much sleep." I ask her if everything's fine, as you'd normally do. "Yeah, it's okay. My uncle got arrested last night, though." The school was in a low socio-economic area, so it's not as unusual as you'd think. Anyway, she tells the story. "Uncle's so stupid. He and his mate thought it would be a good idea to steal a local ATM. They smashed through the windows, put chains around it, and dragged it out with their big truck. They decided it worked well, so they ended up dragging it all the way home." And she gives a half smile. "The thing is, the cops found them easy. They just followed the marks on the road all the way to the front door." I knew this kid in high school who got pulled over for a minor traffic violation. He decided it would be funny to jump out of the car and book it down the street. The cops, of course, go chasing after him, and after a couple of blocks he stops, puts his hands in the air and yells, "Psych!" The cops didn't think it was funny, so they tackled him to the ground and put him under arrest. His parents were wealthy, so he didn't get in that much trouble, but it was still so incredibly stupid. Just for the record, I think that everyone who's caught mid-crime should try this. It hurts nobody, and the idea of someone falling for it tickles me just so very much. Give it a go, bank robbers. You've got nothing to lose. See how it plays out. I'm Swiss. We got mandatory military service duty. When you do this, you usually get to keep your army rifle as a personal rifle at home for the following years, and every year there's a repetition course for about 3 weeks until you're 30 or something. During that time, you keep your weapon at home. You're supposed to keep it locked away, but most people I know just toss it in a corner of the attic or put it below the bed or something. And no, you don't get to keep any ammo. Anyway, a friend was having a party at home. Some friends called him that they're going to show up at his place soon. The door rings, and he's pretty drunk, and he thinks it's a fun idea to take the rifle, unloaded and without any ammo, but still, and open the door and point it out to scare his friends. Unfortunately, it wasn't his friends, but the cops, called by a neighbor because of the noise disturbance. I don't know all the details, but he doesn't have that weapon anymore. Still had to do the rest of his military service, but unarmed, which you can do without problems depending on your function within the army. He also probably paid a fine. Not a cop, but I used to work at a smoke shop. 3 guys broke in through a large window, left blood everywhere just trying to get in, walked right past the high-end, fancy, expensive glass and proceeded to grab as many cheap glass pipes as possible. They went back through the window, breaking 2 or 3 of these pipes in the process of crawling through the tiny hole they'd made, probably cutting themselves even more than they had already had, and hightailed it across the street. They seemed to have dropped damn near everything while running because there was literally a trail of broken glass leading to the apartment across the street. Cops came, followed the glass trail leading directly to someone's door, looked over the little fence to their bottom floor balcony and saw 3 guys all cut up, smoking from a broken pipe. We estimate they took 8 or 9 pipes. They were smoking with the sole survivor. They turned out to be regulars in that store. Never saw them again after that. What is the dumbest advice you've heard from an idiot? Well, relationship falling to pieces? Have a baby. To be on the safe side, it should be phrased as, if you have trouble in your relationship, have a baby. You'll soon forget all about your current trouble. One of my stepdaughters said, I never carry any ID. That way when the police pull you over, they can't tell if you have warrants or not. Yeah, that'll work. I had a health science teacher, in college, mind you, tell the entire class they should all just stop taking their prescription meds because that's what's killing you. That laying with a virgin cures human immunodeficiency virus. Oh, your pen stopped working? Take the ink tube out and suck on the open end of it. That'll make it work again. You can guess what happened. That you can blast bleach up your hoo-ha to clean up the little swimmers, stopping them from making you pregnant after doing the deed. My dad worked as a car salesman for 1 year back in the late 90s. I graduated college in 99 and got my first real job that fall. I'd been driving my grandfather's '82 Chevy Celebrity, which reeked of cigar smoke, and started commuting from rural Maryland to Beltway, Virginia, which was about an hour. I got in an accident involving a deer carcass, bent the frame. My father recommended getting a new car. I'd only 1 or 2 paychecks under my belt, and instead of advising me to look for something used or just doing what I could to keep the Celebrity going, he said I should go to his old dealership, talk to his friend, and get a brand new 2000 VW Jetta. He said since I'd just graduated college, the best plan would be to sign a student lease. That is, a lease with a limit of 15,000 miles a year, despite my 100-mile-a-day commute. I did exactly what he recommended. Totally my fault for not doing the math. I was a dumb kid, too excited by the thought of getting my first brand new car per parental recommendation. I eagerly put a whopping $1,000 down. Cut to 4 years later, the balloon hits and I'm over double the allotted miles. Following my dad's advice, I wound up paying about $30,000 for a $16,000 vehicle. I know this one woman who has serious genetic abnormalities, and if she were to get pregnant, she needs to be monitored by specialists prior to conception and labeled high risk, as one specific health problem could cause the child she carries to develop brain damage or life-threatening congenital problems. Her preacher told her it was wrong to use birth control, or get ultrasounds, or give birth in a hospital, or vaccinate her children. So, she's not getting any healthcare whatsoever besides homeopathy and prayer at church. She's encouraging others with the same condition to live the same lifestyle, because she has one borderline healthy child, not mentioning the other one who didn't make it. Listen, I know none of you like Mr. Liberal wishy-washy narrator voicing his opinions on this stuff, but get your medical advice from medical professionals and your spiritual advice from spiritual professionals. My son's father was a horrible alcoholic. He'd disappear for days at a time. I can't tell you how many times I was told to stick it out just because we had a child together. My 8th grade teacher told us when we got to college to not go to class because the professors like and respect you more if you skip class to figure out the material on your own. I'm glad I didn't listen to that advice. A Christian friend explained that God wanted me to stay a virgin until marriage, but doing it in the butt was totally okay. Apparently, the Lord is very concerned about the intactness of one part of my hoo-ha, but is totally cool with me taking it in the pooper. Go to ITT Tech. It's great. I got so close to doing that, and I'm so glad that I didn't. It was ridiculously expensive and the degree is worthless, but they make it so easy to get into the school and arrange financial aid and student loans. They have recruiters who are good at taking advantage of poor kids like I was. For anyone listening to this, do not do it. No for-profit school is worth it. ITT Tech, University of Phoenix, Devry, those ones. They're all essentially scams. Go to a local public community college or technical college instead. If you're in a bad financial situation, you can work out the same aid through them, but it will be far cheaper. I actually got paid to go to school in my case, and you'll get a degree that will actually get you a job, especially if it's a technical degree. Join the army, they said. See the world, they said. The day I realized I needed to stop taking career advice from my dad was when he said the following when I was about 17. Everyone goes into computers now. Too many people. All the people your brother's age went into computers at university, so there's no point in you doing it. You need to do something different if you want to find a job. I now live with a 29-year-old app developer who earns £45,000. It was terrible advice from a man who was too old to really understand that computers weren't just a fad. Here, take these naturopath salt tablets for your high blood pressure. You need a gaming computer? Get an Alienware. If the poop won't come out, just push and push as hard as you can until it does. Funny story, back in high school I used to wrestle. A common way to make weight, i.e. weigh under a certain amount to fight at that weight class, was to poop. An easy loss of 1 to 2 pounds. A friend of mine was half a pound overweight, so he went to unleash his bowels. A few minutes later, he came out of the bathroom, face beet red and toilet paper hanging out of his pants. During the process of defecating, he found himself constipated. Desperate to force it out, he pushed as hard as he could and ended up bursting several blood vessels in his butt. Blood everywhere. Needless to say, he didn't wrestle that day. This one friend of the family, his wife of more than 20 years, dies from cancer. Now, ex-sister-in-law practically berates him at the dinner table, telling him that now is not the time for being selfish and grieving, the way he wanted, which was moving in with the family to be supported until he got disability housing because he's blind. Nobody had a problem with this apart from his sister. I never wanted to smash someone's face into the dinner table so badly. What an absolute C-word. Here, take this homeopathic vaccine. It's better than the dangerous stuff your doctor wants to give you. When my dad was younger, his older sister had food poisoning, and from what I remember, it was pretty sudden and violent. They called the doctor, and I guess buying Ipecac would have taken too long or something, but he told my grandma to just keep making her eat raw eggs until she puked up what was making her feel ill. Also, my other grandma was told, even though she was not a smoker, to pick up smoking when she was pregnant with her second child, my mum, because her first one was a big baby and the smoking would make the next one attractively small. Svelte, if you will. Had a guy in welding class try to tell me it would be just fine if we connected the oxygen tank to the line that carried argon for TIG welding. A gas is a gas, this'll work just as good. I personally shudder to think about what might have happened if someone struck a welding arc in the presence of pure, extremely reactive oxygen. I mean, hell, the whole point of using argon is to shield your weld from oxygen contamination. Also, oxygen tanks typically have reverse threads to keep idiots like that guy from connecting them to the wrong gas line. Oh, nothing bad's gonna happen, just keep doing the deed with the toaster. Living with debt is okay, you never really have to pay it off. Thanks, fellow medical students. Yeah, everybody has a water buffalo. Load of bullcrap. Where's my water buffalo? The narrator wondered what piece of pop culture he was missing out on with this comment, so he googled it, and it appears that even in my mid-30s with my Christian days well behind me, I can't escape from VeggieTales. Thank you, whoever submitted that.
Abstinence-only education is effective.
The owner of an outdoor summer camp I used to go to did a big lecture about sun protection at the beginning of each week, and always carefully explained that people with darker skin didn't need to wear any. In February 2011, I was denied a UK PSW visa after I completed my Master in Science. The problem was on my end, so I've got no one to blame. Essentially, I screwed up part of the maintenance section of the application. It wasn't that I didn't meet the qualifications, it was just that I filled out the section wrong. I was given a week's time to either leave the country or to appeal the decision. In that time, I spoke to a few immigration solicitors on the best course of action. The first solicitor I spoke with told me that I'd be stupid not to appeal, because that would extend my leave in the UK for as long as the appeal takes. He also said I was stupid to not hire a solicitor in the first place because I wouldn't be in this mess if I did. Then he told me that I was guaranteed to lose my appeal, but I should hire him anyway because at least he knows what he's doing. This would cost me £140 for the appeal and £1,500 for the hiring of this solicitor. No, thank you. Another solicitor I spoke with told me to go ahead with the appeal but to also submit a fresh application. His logic was this: by submitting an appeal, my leave to remain in the UK would be extended until the appeal took place. And because I did meet the qualifications, a new application would be accepted if I filled it in correctly this time around. This sounded like solid advice, so I researched the possibility of doing this. According to the UK BA, you are not allowed to do this. Your appeal and new application get thrown out, of course, after they process the £561 visa fee and the £140 appeal fee. I ended up submitting the appeal, but with advice like this, I could not in my right mind ever consider hiring a solicitor. I ended up representing myself in immigration court and I won my appeal. In short, my UK visa was denied, I ignored the advice of immigration solicitors, and won my appeal because I didn't listen to them. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
Johnnies don't work against human immunodeficiency virus.
I heard this from a generally intelligent, albeit very Christian young lady doing outreach work with inner-city teens. I had to sit her down for a talk. The last thing those kids need is one more person reinforcing the idea that since Johnnies don't always work, there's no point in using them.
Everything will work itself out.
No, it frickin' doesn't. I fix everything, and then they say, "See, it all worked out." I'm so sick of hearing that.
Wait until you're married.
Is the whole no doing the deed before marriage a typical or common American thing? Because I've never once heard anyone give that advice to anyone in the UK. The closest thing I've heard is make sure you're safe, but of course that's actually good advice. Canadian here, my mother's family are very religious, small-town people. I've got a few cousins who got married right out of high school, mostly because they wanted to do the deed with each other, but they're taught that it was wrong to do that before they were married. Okay, now double-click on Internet Explorer. Every time I hear a parent tell me they won't vaccinate their kid because it'll make them autistic, I want to strangle them. I don't want to catch some medieval plague just because they're stupid enough to believe everything they hear or read. Do some research, people. Vaccines may cause some complications in very few people, but the benefits they provide, specifically in preventing global pandemics, far outweigh the risks. Every rose has its thorn. Actually, there are several varieties of thornless roses, just as there are plenty of cowboys who don't even sing. Many years ago, I lived in California and was getting a divorce, during a time this state had decided to add mandatory counseling because of the high divorce rates. So I was waiting, and I can hear everything that's being said by the person in the counseling booth. The woman is crying and saying that her husband has been drinking and making her life miserable since his release from jail. The counselor's response? Listen, you can either break up your family or accept him the way he is. Worst advice ever. Not too bad or anything, but there's a bus route that recently got combined into another route. The 510 no longer comes around, it's only the 509 now. This lady gets on the bus and asks if the 59 goes on the same route as the 510. The bus driver says, "Sort of," and leaves it at that. The lady asks again, "Where does this bus go?" The driver says, "Where do you want to go?"
I don't know, I just know it's on the 510 line.
He looks at her blankly. She then says,
"Never mind, I'll just wait for the 510.
"Okay, you do that." I felt bad for the lady because she left before I could even speak up. The stupid bus driver made her wait in the rain for a bus that would never come. I mean, sure, she was a bit lost and she should know where she's trying to go, but that bus driver was the worst. Go scatter your loved one's ashes wherever. I'm now a funeral director, and there's a huge list of places where it's illegal to scatter them. Most state parks, for example. Families can get fined huge amounts. Cremated remains have no nutritional value and can actually smother plant life in amounts larger than a scattering or dusting. Do not put them directly on your plant's soil. Opposites attract. What is true for magnets is not true for human beings. Also, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. I think that's one of the worst pieces of advice that's commonly given to children throughout the lower levels of grade school. How can you tell a child this and then explain to him why using a racial slur is wrong or why bullying is wrong? Well, I agree with all of these points, in particular about how vocal discrimination and attacks aren't just something you should be expected to walk off. Although, in defense of that crappy sticks and stones saying, it's not as if it follows up with, so go out and insult people because it doesn't matter. The director of a charity bicycling organization to new riders said, "Don't worry about picking up biking gloves, you don't need them. In addition to protecting your hands in the case of a fall, which is only like 1% of their function, cycling gloves protect two nerves that run through your palms. Leaning on handlebars for long periods of time dulls these nerves, and that makes your hand numb and difficult to move. Particularly, it makes it hard to form a fist, which is how you frickin' brake on a bicycle and prevent huge accidents. Gosh darn it. The food pyramid is a total mess. No wonder there's an obesity crisis. You need to learn cursive. You'll use it for the rest of your life. Thanks, third grade teacher. Never change yourself for your boyfriend or girlfriend. If you're a crappy person and are hurting your significant other because of your crappy qualities, then it's always better to change. Also, sometimes small sacrifices are okay to be made if it means maintaining a happy relationship. I feel like part of the reason there's so many divorces is because everyone is being told not to change. You can take this, it's herbal, so it won't interact with any of your other medications. YOLO. But then again, not everyone believes in reincarnation like I do. iPhones don't use Flash, that's why they don't get viruses. You shouldn't even want to have a girlfriend until you're 22 years old, said my dad. My mum said I should wait until I was 23. Screw them both for making me feel crappy about talking to girls at 17. This crap. Yeah, I hate it. Being a girl, so many moms act like it's scandalous to have urges before then. Screw you for thinking there's something wrong with me because I started feeling funny down there when I was 13. That no one will love you unless you lose weight. Drop out now because you'll never amount to anything. Don't vaccinate your kids. That one really infuriates me. There's always money in the banana stand. I checked. Putting a spoon in the mouth of someone having a seizure. Don't do this, they'll choke on top of their other problems. Cleaning the aquarium out with soap and water. Think of the fish. Applying to law school. You can't OD on Tylenol. Lift with your back. Put a real arch in it. You can put more weight on that way. Learning about Shakespeare's The Tempest for my English A-level, and we get to the mask section. The teacher says, I'll give you a brief overview because it's not that important and they never ask you about it in the exam. Exam day arrives, the teacher says, Okay everyone, turn over your paper, your time starts now. 50 pupils open to a 15 marker on the significance of the mask in the play. This wasn't life-changing, but it was entertaining. I was good friends with an Asian exchange student in high school. We had to do a presentation for class, and he wrote some story about dragons, but didn't know the word for dragon. I told him it was master, and then the word for alternatively rooster or a gentleman's downstairs organ. So he went to the front of the class and did a presentation in broken English, saying a rude word about 25 times. It might sound mean, but we were good friends, and these were the sort of things we did to each other. I went to a private Christian high school. In 9th grade, in lieu of life skills classes, we were required to attend a week-long abstinence seminar. During this week, we heard many outrageous lies, but the worst of all was Todd Atkins' little factoid about the female body not being able to get pregnant in the instance of the unspeakable act. Specifically, we were told that the human body releases a fear hormone that acts as a shield around the unfertilized egg. I remember most of my classmates believing this completely, as did the adults who were teaching it to us. So remember, ladies, if you got pregnant as a result of the unspeakable act, it's probably because you actually liked it. I know a guy who thought that if he drank enough Mountain Dew, it would sterilize his little swimmers so he could go without protection. My uncle was also in the Navy, and whenever he and his shipmates would make it to port, they'd briefly walk in front of the radar to sterilize themselves for several days. This was from my dad, the truck driver. Why are you going to college for engineering? You'll never have a pension. Just go get yourself a good union job. Surely the Conservatives can't be any worse than the New Labour. Overheard while working in a restaurant, go get a pan of water to put out that grease fire. I mean, this is terrible advice, but let's be honest. The fact that you can't put out a grease fire with water is a fact that probably just escapes a lot of people. It's one of those bits of common knowledge that barely qualifies as such. I once worked in a nursing home and overheard two black nurses berate this really nice black guy, also a nurse who was from Ethiopia, about not acting black American black. In my opinion, it was the man's sincerity and kind ways that made people like him so much. It made me kind of sick that they were trying to basically poison him against others. After having to cancel a job interview because of a rather severe family emergency, my father-in-law told me to next time just take my 3 children with me to the interviews. This would be bad enough without the added fact that my middle child has social difficulties and needs constant supervision. "Don't unit test, it's stupid and you don't gain anything," said one junior to another. I overheard this over my headphones and music. There was a man in Glasgow, Scotland who'd been repeatedly shanked and was bleeding to death. His family didn't know what to do, but they'd heard of the phrase, to rub salt in the wounds, so that's what they did. He died in agony. Horrifyingly wrong advice. Children can't grow to be healthy, happy, successful, reasonable people unless they're raised by both a heterosexual father and a heterosexual mother. If you climax while she's on top, she can't get pregnant, because gravity. I'm not sure how true this is, but an acquaintance of mine said her doctor told her to keep smoking throughout her pregnancy, or the baby risks going through nicotine withdrawal when it's born. I don't know a lot about babies, but it sounded like she just wanted an excuse to keep smoking. Fundy in my freshman year geology class told the class that erosion isn't real. Last year I had a gay roommate. During the year I was having some girl problems and talking to a friend about it, and she said, "It's because your roommate's gay. You need to spend some time with manly men so you'll be interested in girls again." Never give up on someone you can't go a day without thinking about. That made a bad breakup worse because he held on to it for way too long. The physician who diagnosed me as being diabetic told me to just get more exercise and avoid sweets. I was already physically fit and an avid mountain bike rider. No advice to get AmITheA or see an endocrinologist, which I later did on my own. The specialist, of course, helped me create a sensible management plan. By the way, of the dozen diabetics I've known in my life, 11 were like me, not obese. Just saying because people tend to think diabetes is always the fault of the person who has it. Which animals are the biggest jerks in the zoo, and what do they do? Cassowaries. If anyone needed to go into their enclosure, there had to be 2 others in riot gear. Nothing makes you crap your pants more than scrambling behind those guys and hearing the karate kick of the gods smash a riot shield behind you. Aldabra tortoises. They have an outdoor pen, but obviously they're stuck in a smaller indoor enclosure during the colder months. They won't leave you the F alone. I was watering the plants at one point when 2 big males snuck up behind me and pinned me to the wall. I pinwheeled my arms and fell onto one's back and sort of got to ride him. Other times, they decide to sit right in front of the door, so you're stuck until you convince them to move. You certainly aren't going to move 500 pounds of turtle on your own. If you put a squeegee against the wall, they simply have to knock it over and sit on it. You got the hose out? Yep, they've got to sit on that too. Bringing out food? They'll sit right in the frickin' feed troughs. There's a teaching zoo near where I live, and a few years ago they had to evacuate due to a wildfire. Afterwards, the local paper did a piece on it and they interviewed the people who had to evacuate the animals. They have lions, water buffalo, cougars, hyenas, all kinds of large animals. Which one was the hardest to evacuate? The Galapagos tortoise. He's enormous, bad-tempered, and much more difficult to train than most of the other animals. Getting him out of his enclosure and onto a truck was apparently quite the challenge, especially given the short time frame they had for evacuation. I wasn't there at the time this happened, but I used to volunteer at the Omaha Zoo, and there was the story of Fu Manchu the orangutan. Apparently one of the keepers found Fu and some of his buddies hanging out outside of their enclosure and ushered them back in. When it happened again, the keeper thought that someone was leaving the enclosure open. It happened so much that someone was about to get fired over it. Finally, someone witnessed Fu climbing through an air vent to get to the door, pulling it open enough to expose a gap, and then pulling a piece of wire from his mouth and using the wire to undo the latch and open the door. He had been hiding the wire in between his gums and lips to engineer his escape. It was only a jerk move because he almost got people fired. Otherwise, it was slick as hell. I grew up in St. Louis and went to the zoo a lot when I was a kid. Once I watched 3 jerky kids throwing stuff at a hippo. I was furious, but just stood there because I didn't want to get beat up. And I swear to God, that hippo turned slowly, backed up as close as possible to the moat, and then targeted these kids with a spray of hippo diarrhea in a flow that was truly unbelievable in volume and accuracy. Well, I would say in this one particular instance, the hippos aren't being massive hyper-aggressive jerks. What were those kids thinking? Doesn't everyone know that they're at the top of the list of animals you don't want to mess with? A fate well deserved from them, at least. We had a kookaburra who'd catch lizards, snakes, frogs, and even earthworms so that he could feed them to you. You'd be standing around doing your job, and all of a sudden he'd show up on your shoulder trying to force-feed you a lizard he'd whacked on the ground 30 times. Oh, and by the way, if you covered your mouth, why not try the ear? The ear is a great place to put a dead lizard or live earthworm, apparently. Ah, mate, you're not wrong. I nursed a cookie chick I found when I was still in high school, and once she had matured, she basically became my self-appointed nursemaid. We called her Mon, short for monster, Cookie Monster, get it? And she'd sit outside my window at times when even the sun would be telling you to F off and get back to bed, and subtly smash a snake or lizard or whatever she'd decided to murder on my windowsill until I was awake and had let her in. Then came the struggle to identify what she had in her frickin' beak. If it was still alive, that is, and how to make sure she didn't touch its mangled body to my face. On a couple of occasions, she'd been fooled by something playing dead and let it loose on my bed. Not so great when it's a real angry carpet python who then proceeds to musk crap all over your bed and try to bite your face off like it was your frickin' idea. But there were the times that were awesome, like going down to the Chapman River for a swim and having her follow and watch over me from a tree and just laugh her head off. Or when she'd just get in the house and basically have a screaming match with my dad, which she always won. Or when she'd chase my little sister around the table, by running on the floor, not flying, like it was amusing her, whenever my sister tried to eat brekkie at the same table as me. That bird always had a way to put a smile on my dial, and I missed her something terrible when she finally never came home one morning. I still get all bittersweet when I hear one of them cacking itself. I work with squirrel monkeys, and I go in there with a little bowl of live mealworms for training purposes. One day, one particular monkey was being fairly grabby, reaching for my hair and whatnot. I'd closed up to their cage and was getting ready to leave when I noticed I hadn't slid a hatch shut. I moved closer to the fence to do it, and someone, I don't know who, but I'm betting it was the grabby one, shot a hand out of the cage reaching for the mealworms and knocked the bowl out of my hands. I don't know if you know this, but individual mealworms are hard to pick up off the floor, especially when they're crawling away as fast as their little legs can go. And so then, of course, all the monkeys are on the ground reaching through the fence to grab the little worms while I'm trying to scoop them back into the bowl as fast as I can. That must have been the greatest thing ever to them, like, holy crap, free worms everywhere! I did also have a capuchin monkey throw food at me. I ignored it because I was observing a different monkey at the time, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw the one that I assume threw the food come up to the fence and stick her arm under the door to try and reclaim the food she'd thrown at me. But it was out of her reach. Karma. One time at Busch Gardens, I noticed that the then 2 female orangutans had acquired some materials, several sticks and some t-shirts. I imagine the shirts were for enrichment or something. Anyway, these 2 ladies had torn the t-shirts into approximately inch-wide strips and were clearly assembling a raft design with the sticks. See, their enclosure was surrounded by a moat, and I think they'd figured out this was their best shot at making a break for it. Meanwhile, the male orangutan had taken another t-shirt and just put his head through the neck hole. He hadn't put the t-shirt on, instead he draped it over his head and he'd lift up the bottom hem and play peekaboo with the tourists. I'm sure there are problem animals in other areas of my zoo as well, but the animal that's the biggest jerk that I've worked with takes the form of a baby camel. Now, most children don't think about camels as dangerous animals, but usually, after a quick Google search, it'll show you plenty of videos displaying just how strong and terrifying they can be. Fortunately, that's not an issue for us. All of our camels are well trained and pretty well behaved, so long as you don't leave anything sitting around them that you aren't prepared to have eaten by one of the giant lugs, except for this one camel. This baby camel was orphaned by her mother, so she's been raised by us for the most part. Usually, she's pretty sweet and fairly easy to get along with, but I've never seen an animal go through bigger mood swings than her. One moment she'll be rubbing up next to you looking for attention, but the next moment you have your back turned, she'll be half reared up and ready to kick. Then after failing to murder you, she'll try to come back to you for more affection like none of this ever happened. She'd use any reason as an excuse to try and attack one of us too. Oh, that stick that's been in my enclosure for a week and I've never reacted to?
Now that you're in my enclosure as well, it's now clearly an attacker and I need to destroy everything in my immediate radius. Now I know what you're thinking, it's just a baby, right? What harm could she possibly do? Well, by 6 months she was already past 200 pounds and still growing. She'll easily pass 1,000 pounds when she's fully grown. So trying to lead her outside in the morning when she was in a homicidal mood was a hassle to say the least, dodging kicks and trying to hold on to her lead while she did her best to murder you. I'd easily say 90% of the injuries sustained on the job in our department were due to her. That being said, I still love the little Antichrist, and she's definitely started to calm down with age and take her training a bit better, but that couldn't come fast enough for most of our shins and ankles. Yep, camels are up there with hippos for me in the list of animals that I am not at all prepared to mess with. I've never met someone who's ridden one who didn't have a story about them being spitty, bitey, and bad-tempered. Do better, camels. I used to volunteer at a zoo, and the biggest jerk were the ravens. They were really smart and awesome for enrichment activities and for teaching classrooms, but if they got bored, they'd find a way to entertain themselves. One particular time, a raven decided to place some of its food right outside its caged enclosure to lure a peacock, and once the peacock got close and started to eat, the raven would sneak up and pluck the tail feathers off the peacock. I interned my senior year of undergrad at a zoo and I loved it. I wish I'd stuck with it. Here are the animals that I worked with. Snow leopards. The mom and dad were big jerks. Wouldn't actively attack or anything, but they just didn't want any interaction with us. We had a cub born the day before I started, so I got to help raise this little jerk. We tried to be as hands-on as possible when we weighed her every week, but that little cub was mean. I have scars from her, but it's a pretty cool story to say you have scars from a snow leopard. Papa leopard almost knocked me out once. I got close to the fence to look for him. The fence was kind of that loose chain-link mesh steel, so it moved if you leaned on it. I went to look for him because we were trying to shift him inside for the evening. I lean on the fence and he comes out of nowhere and pounces on the fence right above my head, then trots inside. I don't think he was trying to eat me, just knock me on my butt. Then of course there are all the monkey jerks. Hanuman langurs. They are the worst. We had a mum and a daughter and they hated anything that was male, which I happened to be. I cleaned up their poo and fed them, but they still hissed and yelled at me. Francois Langur. This little guy was way cooler than his roommates. He had a faux hawk and knew where treats were kept in my pockets. He'd give you a pat down if you came by to visit. And the red pandas, the sweetest little things. They're basically slow and clumsy raccoons. They'd do anything for a grape or biscuit. And finally, the cougars, my favorite by far. These were the two cuddliest giants I've ever seen. One was like 100 pounds, and the other had a weight problem and was easily 200. The smaller one was a female, and I would have felt very comfortable if there was ever a reason I'd be locked in her cage alone. The big guy was very sweet as well, but I feel like instinct may kick in with him sometimes. They both loved scratches on their head and cheeks, and they'd purr. They were humongous house cats, basically. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I've visited a popular wildlife rehabilitation center in South Africa called Maholoholo. I know, right? It's a great name. About 7 or 8 times. They have at the center arguably the world's most famous honey badger called Stoffel. Now, I'm sure none of you need an introduction to how frickin' savage these animals are, but this particular jerk has actually featured on multiple TV shows because of his antics. In the first few years of his life at the center, he dug his way into the lion enclosure twice and attacked the alpha male of the pride both times. How did he live through this, you ask? So the honey badger actually has this incredible survival mechanism. Their skin is really tough and really loose. When the lion clamped his jaws around Stoffel, he was actually able to rotate his skeleton within the skin and turn around to bite the lion on the nose. After the lion dropped him, Stoffel continued to terrorize the pride, but none of them wanted to be anywhere near him. I think eventually they had to tranquilize Stoffel so they could treat his wounds. When he kept digging his way under the wall of his enclosure, it had to be rebuilt 2 meters deeper into the soil. When he opened up cracks in the concrete and escaped, those had to be covered with metal sheets. When he used rocks and sticks to create a tower and climb over the wall, they removed them, only for him to steal a zookeeper's broom and climb out using that. He terrorized one of the staff regularly. The best was when Brian said he woke up to Stoffel's scraping at the door, so he grabbed a 10,000-volt stun gun from his cupboard and zapped the honey badger little jerk with it. Stoffel didn't move. Didn't even flinch. Brian says he just got angrier and started growling. Brian had to climb out the window and lock all the doors while they worked out what to do about Stoffel. I know many more stories of his antics, but my favorite is how, after years of living on his own, they decided to find him a female companion to join him in the enclosure. And the first thing Stoffel did with his new wife? Stood on her head and used her to climb over that wall again. Our local zoo used to have peacocks walking around freely. Those little jerks hated people. Chased lots of small children before they got kicked out finally. Ex-zookeeper here, orangutans are super smart, super strong, and super jerks. Well, some are. We had a female who, if you were standing in front of her indoor enclosure, would spit and hit you in the mouth every damn time. And she'd smile. She grinned so big when it happened. Lesson learned. I've been behind the scenes at a zoo once in my life. It was while they were feeding the monkeys or primates or whatever the proper term is. An orangutan with a mouthful of fruit looked at me, sighted in, and launched a golf ball-sized wad of spit and fruit at me. Hit me straight in the mouth. As gross as it was one hell of a shot. Well, I believe that's the fourth orangutan story in this video, meaning that there are frontrunners just for sheer quantity of stories. Although, to be fair, most of theirs are just them playing mean pranks, not the eviscerate-y, scary stuff that the big cats and birds seem to get up to. A wallaby named Wallace Montgomery. He was hand-raised, translation a frickin' psycho, and then given to us when he became a wee bit overwhelming for his previous caretaker. Feeding time? Be prepared to be gouged by his razor-sharp nails, bit on your softest parts, and the bowl will be knocked out of your hands. Cleaning time? He'll grab your rake and shovel, hit you with them, and kick you when you try to bend down to pick up your stuff. Trying to give him fresh straw to sleep on? Nope. He shredded the bag it came in. He picked up the dirty, urine-filled straw and rubbed it all over you. I love him immensely, actually. Fun fact, if you pick him up mid-tantrum, he'll just lay his head on your shoulder and give you 3 solid minutes of snuggles before recommencing your attempted murder. When I worked as a zookeeper intern, I think the biggest jerks were the emus. It was the summer of 2004, and the emus shared an exhibit with the wallabies. The exhibit wasn't high security, it was essentially a fence made of dried bamboo stalks. Wallabies are super cute, and while we didn't have an area where they're in the same place as visitors, some zoos do. Wallabies are not typically threatening to visitors in any way. The emus, though, were big jerks. They constantly pecked at the wallabies and were generally a pain in the butt. They weren't separated because they didn't cause actual injuries. The wallabies eventually got their revenge and freedom, though. One night, one of the emus ran into the fence and sort of gently impaled itself. It wasn't badly injured, but it did fall down after the injury. So what did the wallabies do? They kicked it in the head until it was dead. The wallabies and emus were separated the next day. As a side note, zebras are jerks too. Our zebras shared an exhibit with the giraffes. We had a giraffe platform where visitors could feed the giraffes carrots, grain, and other goodies, according to the giraffe diet, of course. The zebras wanted the goodies and would kick the giraffes in the leg so the giraffes would drop their food. Then the zebras would eat it. Not quite the same thing, but I volunteered at an aquarium while in high school. I later worked at another aquarium, but that's beside the point. I used to talk at different exhibits. The worst was beluga whales, at least they were for me. It's the first stop and lots of people come, and I was just too anxious to go on mic in front of that many people. One of our whales was a young male. He interacted with the guests the most, often pushing his melon against a glass and blowing out water. There are videos of him with a mariachi band and at weddings during ceremonies. So yeah, a young male whale. Young male whales are excitable, if you catch my drift. Sometimes he'd get so excited, he would rub himself on the biggest piece of glass. He only seemed to do this on the busiest days or when we had lots of kids. Normally, I'd talk about other stuff and people just kind of pointed and laughed. Some people would ask what was happening, to which I'd reply, "Oh, you know how these young guys are," and people usually got it after that. One day, on a super busy day, the whale rubbed himself until he finished. Whale splooge for everyone to see. I was barely 16 at the time, and I was mortified when kids ran up to ask me what that explosion was. The whale just swims away, that smug jerk that he was. Oh, this one frickin' octopus. I was volunteering at an aquarium in the cephalopod section. One day the power was out, so we were on backup generators and we were running all over to make sure everything necessary to keep the animals alive was still running. The tanks where we kept the giant Pacific octopuses, these things are about 8 or 9 feet across, didn't have a solid top to close it up. Instead, the top portion of the tank is covered by astroturf. Octopus suckers can't work on AstroTurf, so they can't climb out. In theory, this witch jams herself into the water outtakes in her tank while no one is paying attention. Water keeps going in, but none can get out. She makes a frickin' waterfall out of the tank and tries to ride it to freedom. We caught her just after she flopped onto the floor. They're just too frickin' smart. Swans are pure devil spawn. They want to kill anything that moves near them. Sweet harmless baby ducks born in the pond? Initiate murder instinct. Man who feeds me and cleans my awful poo-poo every day? Start up the murder protocol. Even the dumbest of invertebrates know that we fed them and would be kinder. Swans see you bringing them out food from across the park and are furious that, "You stole my food I never had and put it in that bucket you're bringing toward me, and I'm going to beat the crap out of this groundhog near me because of it and then try to murder you." Swans are the worst. Imprinted raptors will try to mate with your head if you're not careful. This is especially problematic when you're dealing with large birds like eagles. Fortunately, the largest bird that's attempted this with me is a Mississippi kite, so I'm safe for now. Yeah, the narrator is fine in theory with most birds, but there's no denying that those guys do not think the same way that mammals do. I find pet birds very unnerving as they can be bitey, and then apparently, when they're not chomping at you, they're trying to couple with your head. Right now, my arch-nemesis is the short-tailed, leaf-nosed fruit bat. I'm an intern in a well-known zoo. We have a wet cave filled with about 1,000 of these little jerks. The door is surrounded by a wire cage. When we go to feed them, we just let the door open and let the bats fly into the cage. When we leave, we have to herd them into the cave. As an intern, I'm not allowed to touch them, so I put my hand up by them to guide them in. Except they don't like that and they'll fly right into my face and hover there for a few minutes. One day I was doing it by myself, and one of those little monsters would not get in the damn cave. I stood there for like 10 minutes doing jazz fingers, and he just hung in front of my face. Jerk. Monkeys. Definitely the monkeys. They're cunning, fast, and incredibly strong for their size, and they will find any opportunity to mess with you. Ironically, we had an enormous tiger that had been part of a circus, and while it weighed a couple of 100 pounds and could have just killed you with a swat of its paw, really it just wanted to be petted. It was more likely you would be crushed when it pushed its head against you for a good scruffing. I work with chimpanzees, and I'll tell you, when the girls are in estrus, which is kind of like being in heat for dogs, they are just downright mean to the males of their troops, sometimes even going as far as taking prized food items right out of the mouths of some of the lower-ranking males. I've also seen fights between chimpanzees, which is kinda normal as aggression is central to their social hierarchies, but the fights finally die down and everyone's making up with one another as they usually do, until one of the females who wasn't done arguing hands one of the males a rock to throw at another female who she was still mad at. This of course led to the fight starting all over again. I've worked in various wildlife rehab or research facilities, including a bird sanctuary where we did mist netting, which is setting up very fine nets between trees to catch songbirds, and banding of wild birds for research or population counts. I handled everything from thrushes to woodpeckers to crows to sparrows, and you know who the biggest jerks were? Fricking chickadees. Most of the birds were scared or curious when we took them out of the nets, but the chickadees? They were mad. There was something bizarrely respectable about it. Here I am holding a bird smaller than the palm of my hand whose head I could crush with my frickin' thumb, and it's going, "You may be bigger than me, but if you don't let go of me, I'll rip your frickin' cuticle off." As an aside, the woman who owned and ran one of these rehabs where I worked had rescued and cared for wolves, bears, lynx, mountain lions. The one animal that put her in the frickin' hospital? It was a white-tailed deer. It gored the crap out of her. Ooh, in the same facility, our female black bear loved rainy days. She'd wait until a school or tour group got up nice and close to her enclosure, then gave the wet ground an almighty whack with her front paw and sprayed the entire group with mud. She did that every damn time. When did you realize that your parents were master criminals? If we were at home and they yelled, "Pigs!" we were to hide behind the couch and be silent. If we were in the car and they yelled, "Pigs!" we had to lie down on the floor and not move a muscle. I was kidnapped in grade 3 by my dad's supplier. He held us for 2 days. We had no idea. My sister and I met him before, loads of times. When he showed up at school and said our parents were on vacation and to go with him, we did. They had soda and Oreos and a puppy and a Sega Genesis, and it was the best weekend of my life. I found out 20 years later when my mum was complaining about never having had a vacation in her life I reminded her of that vacation and she said, "You idiot, you were kidnapped."
Oh, cool.
My blood father was a substance dealer and he often came home with some really nifty stuff. I later found out it was stuff he got from people who didn't have cash on them but still wanted to buy. I think the thing I feel most guilty about was a Game Boy Advance I was given that we'd either only have for a little while or have forever. And when he said that, it was usually forever. It had a heap of games with it, and I went through and started new games on all of them, erasing the existing save files. Well, he took that one back after a month, so I guess whoever it was paid up, and I feel really sorry for that kid. Mummy or Daddy had needed a fix and used their Game Boy Advance as collateral, and when they got it back, all of their saves were gone. I was only a kid at the time and didn't really know the context in which I was handed the thing, but I know it belonged to a kid since there were quite a few young child learning game cartridges alongside Mario and Pokemon. Not my parents, but a friend's dad gave us some solid advice that I always remembered. Remember, boys, don't break the law when you're breaking the law. It applies in so many ways. For example, don't run a stop sign when you're carrying in the car, or don't speed if your inspection is out of date, or don't get the police called for a noise complaint if you've had a beer while underage. He was a shady guy, but oddly wise in many ways. I mean, I knew it was illegal, but probably growing all of that green herb outside when I was a kid. Dad was going to die of cancer, so he wanted to leave us some money. It was like Diet Breaking Bad. Well, there it is, probably the most wholesome thing we're going to hear about in this particular video. Strap in, folks, it's probably all repressed trauma from here on out. My mum and dad are trained artists, and they would frequently counterfeit things like parking permits, coupons, doctor's notes, among other stuff. It was wild. Ours made us blow into breathalyzers so they could drive. My mum was the dealer. There are so many things I could list, but I'm on my phone, so just a few things off the top of my head. Smoking herb. When I was about 4, I chased my mum through the Woolworths pharmacy, shouting, "Mommy, Mommy, you dropped your special cigarette. Don't you want your special cigarette?" She hurried me out of there, shushing me, and I got a big talking to that afternoon. She also snorted white snow. I was in the 2nd grade when I got sent to the principal's office for teaching my friends how to make lines with salt and use part of a straw to snort it. My mum was real angry about that. We got told not to talk to cops or any straight people. I didn't know why at first, but I lived in terror of straight people. I got congratulations for making it through FBI questioning when I was probably 6 years old when they raided our land. SWAT teams are real scary. She taught me that bras and women's chests are great for smuggling. Cleaning out stems and seeds is a fun summer job. Don't say anyone's name on the phone. These are just a few things I can immediately recall. Oh, and I forgot to add how every now and then people in our circle of friends would move far away and change names, and we weren't ever allowed to call them by their old names. Mum also made us believe that morphine was an excellent pain reliever for almost anything. Which is true, but for a 6-year-old, maybe just a little Pamel or Tylenol for a headache is better. My dad was a tow truck driver, and he'd always bring me little presents as a kid that he got out of people's tow cars. As far as I knew, if someone knew their car was going to get towed, they took everything they wanted out of it, and the rest was fair game. Holy crap, same. My parents owned a repossession business when I was a kid. That's how I got my first computer. Someone had just left it in the car. Reading this thread makes me wonder about their business as a whole. My impression has always been that it was a legit business, but that my dad had just dodged taxes and eventually got caught. Now I'm thinking it's possible it was a front of some sort. My dad was investigated by the FBI for racketeering, but they were unable to press charges on him. He was also sued by a major financial entity for racketeering as well. Anyway, when I was a teenager, my dad had a lawsuit brought against him by multiple employees for unpaid overtime, and he ordered me to go through the boxes upstairs in a warehouse that would had to find all of their time cards. That storage area was a disaster. Papers everywhere. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find them, so I told my dad that it was no use, the time cards weren't there. My dad then yelled at me, telling me that he needed those time cards, and said that all of these people were trying to rip him off, so if I had to, just make up the time cards for them so that they were working 40 hours a week with no overtime, but don't bother telling him about what I did to get the time cards when I had them. I just had to have them for him one way or the other. I didn't think much about that last bit until I realized much later. But long story short, I ended up making time cards that he used for his case. He won. Realized several years later that my dad had used me for forgery, and when I confronted him about it, he just laughed and said that I was a minor at the time, and nobody puts a minor in jail for white-collar crime. I've run into some of those employees since then, and when they accosted me for being his daughter and how they'd want to punch my dad, or worse, if it was him they ran into, I've always confessed this to them. Ironically enough, they've all said that they'd punch him on my behalf too, because the fact that he used his own daughter annoyed them even more. And about the racketeering thing? He loved laughing about that and calling himself a Don. When I was going to take over the business several years later, after the forgery bit, his oldest employees gave me loyalty oaths, and I ran like hell. My dad absolutely was a racketeer. My boyfriend always talks about the stories of his dad having friends everywhere. Family would talk about how his now late father had friends no matter where he went in the city, and how great that was. And no matter where they stopped, he'd randomly know someone there. Then, as an adult, he realized that his dad just had dealers everywhere, and that's who he was always seeing. Oh, my mum. Shoplifting for the most part. I mean, like, she never made us do it, but she didn't hide what she was doing either. She's the reason model homes have cameras now. My dad stole a few things in a sneaky way so my brother and I would have one each. In one instance, for example, he bought a Game Boy game. He brought it back to the car, removed the cartridge, and took it back into the store saying the case was empty. He did the same thing with those Pikachu Tamagotchi things. I think his biggest steal was a PlayStation 2. He actually did pre-purchase one. My mum went in and picked it up, but when leaving the store, the door person didn't tear the receipt. So, my dad took the receipt back in, picked up another PS2, stuck the receipt on it and walked out. The door person tore the receipt this time, but obviously didn't pay attention to the time of sale. Dad also ran a huge, quote, business of installing chips in PlayStations so that they could play copied games. He'd rent games, burn a copy, then sell copies to other people. We had a whole library and catalogue of copied games, and Dad had quite a few customers. Looking back, I see how dodgy it was and why he told me not to tell too many people about it. My mum was put on house arrest for substance charges, had an ankle bracelet and a breathalyzer device that would go off at random times of the day to make sure she wasn't drinking. We had to have a whole separate landline for this purpose. As she got further into her house arrest, she'd start to really try to pull sly crap and take gambles on when her random screenings would be. She'd make me take the breathalyzers, and I think once or twice she even had me pee into a cigar case that she was planning on stuffing up her you-know-what to fudge the test. My memory is pretty hazy. The irony of all of this is that she got nabbed for failing a substance test, claiming that it was after getting Novocaine at the dentist's office. This was like 20 years ago, so I don't know if that was possible back then. If it was true, then it's hilarious because she felt like she didn't deserve to get caught, completely ignoring the fact that she did deserve to get all the other times she pulled her shady tricks. You know, it took me a long time to get over my confusion that not everyone at my school knew all of the police officers by name during the DARE program. It was a small town. Not because someone in my family was a cop, but because I thought they just showed up at everyone's houses all the time, just like me. It's funny how we assume everyone lives similar lives when we're kids. Oh. Aside from all the really dark and permanently affecting implications of the stuff we're getting here, there's something so very cute and pure about this one, in a heartbreaking way. I thought the cops came and looked at everyone's house from time to time. Doesn't Officer Brian make sure your room is tidy too? My family did a lot of petty, trashy crime, like shoplifting, theft, muggings, substances, among other stuff. I thought it was normal for adults to just kind of go to jail every few years for a day or two, until I was 10. Now, my stepdad is out of my life, and my mum is too old or ill to do anything particularly bad. But my dad may have helped finance a district attorney's election, which has saved him mountains in legal fees for himself and the working girls he frequents. I don't know, and probably never will know, what my parents did. However, we'd leave the house at nighttime and go drive through certain parks. Occasionally, my parents would panic and tell us to hide. We had to crawl onto the floorboards in the back of a tiny Buick. My dad came home with injuries sometimes, and my mum always said he fell. And finally, in that particular town, they hated the cops. They claimed they were all corrupt, and maybe they were. I don't know. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My parents would often get me to answer the phone as a young kid, like 4 or 5 and older. Anyways, the people on the phone always asked if Jones Mollusk was there. My parents would coach me to say, "No, Jones Mollusk lives here. I don't know who that is." Well, as a kid, I really didn't have a clue who Jones Mollusk was because my dad was always just Dad or went by his nickname. I didn't click for years that that was actually his name. I guess I helped my parents evade a few debt collectors and God knows what else. Also, me and my sister used to go play Barbies in Daddy's clubhouse. It was our favorite place. Dad built it himself in our backyard, and they even had a big bar and pool table. They bought a velvet couch for me and my sister to play on while Dad played pool and visited with all of my uncles. Dad always called it his clubhouse, too. So when people asked where my dad was, I'd say Dad was probably in his clubhouse. To which my mum would always get so mad at me and I'd be so confused, because that's what Dad said, and everyone else called it that too, but I wasn't supposed to talk about it apparently. Yeah, so my dad was in a biker gang. And let's see, there's probably some more stories from his wacky life. When he took us places like the aquarium or amusement parks, he always used to try and get us in cheaper. Well, one thing about me was that I was always a really oblivious child. This both helped and hurt him, such as those phone calls I talked about. I mean, I legitimately didn't know who Jones Mollusk was for years, guys. But in some cases, it also backfired. So once my dad was trying to get us into a park or something, and he lied about my age to get me in cheaper. Insulted immediately, I puffed up and said, "Dad, I am not 6, I am 7. Cue the eyebrow raise of the attendant and my dad puffing back, "You're freaking 6. Good times. I can't remember if we got in cheaper or not. Probably not. He was so angry. Afterwards, he told me, "If I say you're 6, you're freaking 6. Eyes roll. Dads are weird, I thought. My dad also hated cops growing up. He used to call them effing pigs. It always made snide remarks about cops just eating donuts and generally being useless. He'd get stopped a lot by them. I guess they knew about him and his general associates. Anyways, one day we stopped at a Wendy's and Tim Hortons split restaurant. Now, if you don't know, sometimes restaurants share a building together, and in this case, we were only separated by a short wall to the other side of Tim's. We were waiting for our burger, and me being like 4 or 5 whatever, I was up on my knees looking over the partition. Well, there on the other side was a table full of cops. I remember feeling shocked and suddenly exclaiming very loudly, "Dad, you're right! All of those pigs do is eat donuts!" My mother was mortified and she pulled me down to sit. The cops all looked over, I guess, and started laughing, luckily. My dad thought it was hilarious. My dad was a mechanic. The things that stick out was when he had charged for a new replacement part and then go to the local junkyard and get the part from there instead. If the customer asked up front, he'd be honest and offer the 2 options. The junkyard part, which would be cheap but likely reliable, or a new expensive part with a warranty. If they didn't ask most of the time, it was a junkyard part. Rarely got in trouble or called out since his prices were just a fraction of regular shops. Oh, and I guess the other main shady part was that he wasn't a legit, certified mechanic and most business was cash or under the table. His apprentice is now my mechanic and he learned from my dad's mistakes. He provides receipts, boxes, and shows me where he installed the new part, and it's always shiny and new, minus obvious grease handling and installation marks. Substances. I had no idea they were illegal until I was a lot older than I should have been to understand they're illegal. My father was a grower and distributor to a well-known motorcycle club he was a part of. We grew up running around Mary J. Fields. I slept on a couch most of my childhood because all of the rooms had been converted into hydroponic setups. Our roof space was converted into storage where it was just garbage bags of the stuff, around 100 to 150 square meters, all stacked up on top of each other. And there was other stupid stuff too. Apparently owning unregistered weapons is illegal, and you need a driver's license to drive a vehicle. It was normal for people in my family to be in and out of jail. It was normal for most of them to have some sort of criminal record. We were always taught to not respect cops. For example, when my dad found Green Herb in my 16-year-old sister's car, instead of reprimanding her for having it, he reprimanded her for how easy it would be for the cops to find it. We were always watching mob movies and my dad would just gush about how classy and cool they were. It's just little stuff like that mostly, nothing super outrageous. I used to be told that everything was okay as long as you don't get caught. They kind of said it like a throwaway phrase, but I really took it to heart. It gave me a real lack of respect for any authority at all, and made it seem more like a game than real-life consequences. I'd do illegal stuff just to get the rush of wondering whether or not I'd be caught. Once I was caught, I'd just shrug and act like their winning didn't bother me. Kinda like their punishment was just them gloating about me getting caught. A family friend was in the import-export business for gemstones. I didn't realize it could be illegal to transport gems across international borders. We'd have gem parties where a dining table that can sit 12 would be completely covered in bowls of gems and jewelry to buy. Same as Tupperware parties, but for gems. Some stones my parents got appraised shocked their jeweler. super rare colors of different stones that they'd never seen before. That one friend has gone legit and owns some mines in Africa now. Ugh. So legitimately probably the most evil person in this video. I can get being desperate or not being able to see another life for some of these people, but I'm willing to bet there were certainly conflict diamonds at that table, and that's a real conscious choice to invest in a human rights violation. I never knew we weren't allowed to drink at the local fair. Mum used to bring beer in a cooler when we went. I continued to not know until I was 21 and a cop stopped me when I was walking around with a beer in hand. Oh boy, this is bringing up very specific memories. My dad never said explicitly what he was doing was acceptable, but he certainly didn't tell me that this was wrong. Between the ages of 5 to 7, I'm not sure about the specific timeline on this, my mum was often working in the evenings while my dad was sporadically around. One night, while my mum was gone, Dad gathered me to go on an adventure. Usually this meant driving around the city and looking at stuff. Well, Dad pulls up to a hospital and parks. He sits with me in the car and gives me a script saying that we recently moved there. A lie. And that he had hurt his back while moving boxes. A complete fabrication. I play along because, hey, it's my dad, and sure, whatever he says goes. Any other specifics from that night are pretty hazy. I think he managed to talk his way into some sort of painkiller prescription. This was in the early noughties, so opioids aren't as visible as now. My dad has been in successful treatment since then, but man, that's a big memory that stands out for how messed up my younger life was. My dad's no serious criminal, but petty in every way, including the crime he commits. I was basically taught to play dumb, act like you belong, and you can do whatever you want. We snuck into VIP lounges, other people's buffets and parties at restaurants and events. He once lied to a ticketer at a movie theater and got mad when they couldn't find the tickets he ordered online. He had not ordered tickets, but there was a huge line and he didn't want to wait. We got in for free and cut a huge line. Also cut lines at Disney World and other sorts of places. I'm now very embarrassed when he does things like this, and would never act this way myself. I think I might have always been uncomfortable with it, which is why I so detest it now. But it's something that's always in my mind, like some sort of dark superpower I might have. To use it, I just have to stop having self-respect. Quite a few things. As a bit of backstory, my biological father was convicted of murder, got away with another murder through claiming self-defense, I've got no clue if that was true, and apparently had a third murder that he never got caught for. He would steal constantly, from people to things inside of stores. One of my earliest memories is wanting this super cute pink hat. I believe I was around 8. He put it on my head and told me to just walk to the car. I remember asking about paying and he said, "Don't worry, just walk." So little old me walks to the outside doors with her heart pounding, and the alarm goes off. I freeze and run back to my dad that was still shopping. The first lesson I remember I learned? You just need to keep walking when those alarms go off. He died a few years back. My brothers and I are decent people. My brother is a great dad, despite the example set for him by his dad. I grew up in a relatively hostile environment. So many people come up so much worse, so I'm not really complaining. In mine, my mum had a bunch of boyfriends. Most were cool, some were garbage. Nice ladies came to talk to me at school sometimes, and after the first visit, my mum coached me pretty hard about what to say. She definitely taught me that beer was just soda that grown-ups drank that only tastes good when you're grown up. So, "he drinks a lot of soda" came up a few times. Again, really not that bad, but come on, Ma, what the frick? I have fond memories of hanging out in the shed with my parents, me playing with my dolls and them harvesting their money trees, green herb being strewn all over the floor and hanging from the ceiling, the leaves made into a little bed for my Barbie to sleep in. There were a lot of weird things I didn't think much of as a kid but realized were messed up as an adult, like how our family moved 13 times in 15 years. I just assumed people got new houses all the time, and how sometimes I'd go to the freezer for some ice cream and find stacks of cash in the containers. Just weird stuff like that. My brother, who was much more than a decade older than me, was a substance dealer. A prominent one as well. He pretty much could get you anything. I've got fond memories of driving around at night with him, making stops to see his friends, and then him getting money. Sometimes clients would come to the house to pick up their stuff. I can remember getting bags of pills together. At the time, pills, specifically Oxy, were all the rage. He used to call himself a pharmacist. When we'd go out, you'd notice certain people would follow us. My brother would point them out. That's a detective, that's the DEA, etc. He died almost 10 years ago. I'm a professor who teaches criminology. Today, we're actually talking about substance trafficking, which naturally is my favorite crime and the one I've studied the most, from a young age. me how to weigh cash out on a scale so you don't actually have to count it. Taught me how to roll a wacky tobacco and how to use a gat. He gave me my first Xanax and my first beer. To be honest, he did the best for me with what he knew how to do.
What was the craziest bachelor or bachelorette party you ever went to, and what happened at it? My grandfather used to tell a story about how he and his friends got the bachelor passed out and put him on a train. This would have been in Ohio in the 1930s. Apparently, the guy made it back for the wedding, but barely. At a friend's bachelorette party, mild fun and hilarity was had. Drinks, food, silly party games, the usual. The bachelor party was happening a few towns away, and the groom was staying in a hotel room overnight with a few of his college friends. His best man got him off his face and encouraged him to sleep with his ex, who had somehow been invited. He confesses it all to my friend the next morning. It was really awkward. The wedding was on, then off again, then on for a few days. They did end up getting hitched, but now they're divorced. I remember sitting there during the ceremony thinking, they won't last, and he confessed that he'd never actually been in love with her. Marriage just seemed like a good idea at the time. I climbed a medieval castle wall and found a load of reenactors camping inside. I announced I was taking the castle and tried to drunkenly fight a few knights. I was marched out the gate, my kingdom in ruins. With no siege engines or supply chain to speak of, your conquest was destined to fail. At least you fell in glorious combat rather than on the bathroom floor of some seedy motel. Up to this comment, I wondered if I should be one of those obnoxious girls who don't let their fiancé have bachelor parties, but the chance of this happening over the chance of him getting a transmissible disease from an exotic dancer might persuade me. My best man fell down some steps at an adult dance club and somehow got his foot stuck under something. Another groomsman helped him and broke his ankle in the process. It was black the next day and he was on crutches for the wedding 4 weeks later. My dad likes to tell the story of a bachelor party a friend of his had, where they liberated him of his clothes, then chained him to a tree in front of his in-laws to B's house and left him there. He had been passed out drunk, and the future in-laws got woken up by his horrified screaming at 6 a.m. The wedding still went off a few hours later. Depending on the in-laws and their expectations, I feel like this isn't necessarily a deal-breaker. It might be a matter of what country you're living in, but I feel like a lot of people would put it down to just lads being lads. Who knows? Although personally, I think people who have the party the night before are insane. Is that an American thing? Oh, my story happened to the mother of the groom at a wedding in West England in the 1980s. True story. The groom was to be taken to a pub the night before his wedding. Stag nights were much more local back then, and he got totally blitzed. His friends dragged him up the path unconscious to his house at 3 a.m., opened the front door with his key, and then dumped him on the front room sofa. One of his friends didn't think he looked quite right sprawled on his back on the sofa, so he went to the kitchen and found a sausage in the fridge. Returned to the living room, undid his friend's zip, inserted the sausage hanging out at the gap, and zipped up. They closed the curtains and disappeared into the night. In the morning, the groom's mum walked into the room, which was still dark, went to the window, threw open the curtains, turned around, and there was the family cat eating the sausage. Mother fainted, hit her head on a stone fireplace, and missed the wedding, and had to explain why there was a bandage on her head for the following week. The groom was never allowed to forget it. In the UK, they're known as stag do for the guys. One of my colleagues, quite a few years ago now, held his stag do the night before his wedding. Never a good idea, right? We hit a couple of pubs before going for a meal in a Chinese restaurant in Chinatown, London. Afterwards, we got into a nightclub off Leicester Square. Long story short, my colleague disappeared. Got to midnight and we couldn't find him. He wasn't in the club, nowhere around it, wasn't answering his phone. We gave up in the end and went home. Got to church next day and there's the bridesmaid and the best man turning people away. Our colleague had apparently chatted up a girl in the nightclub and gone back to her place. So I guess he went too far. He didn't return to work as his now ex-fiancée also worked with us in the same department. That's how they met. So at least he didn't make things difficult at work. A friend of mine once told me about a guy she knew who accidentally touched an exotic dancer's butthole at his bachelor party, ended up sleeping with her and later found out he'd contracted herpes. We were mostly caught up on how one accidentally touches someone's butthole. Oops, sorry ma'am. Well, since we've already gone this far. A bachelor/bachelorette party seems much more fitting after a marriage or divorce than before.
It's not me, but my cousin's husband went to Vegas for his party and, of course, cheated on her. She found out about that time and a few others. They're now divorced. Bottle thrown during a fight at an exotic dance club sliced the best man's face from right above the eye to below the left ear. He looked like a bloody mummy at the wedding. Not my story, but my friends. Number 1. The bachelorette party was held out of town. The bachelor party was in town. Bachelor party concluded with everyone going back to the bachelor's little apartment to drink more. The bride got home from a nice weekend at the spa with her ladies to a totally trashed apartment. Holes in the wall, fridge pushed over and broken, cigarette holes in the couch, lots of broken plates and pictures, and the wedding was called off. The second, a cousin of the bride gets mad at the groom for some reason. She sends him a video she shot from the bachelorette party. It's a short video of the bride-to-be getting serviced by a gentleman in the washroom while laughing and throwing gang signs. The video ended when the fellow in question splooges in the bride-to-be and she yells, "Oh crap!" That wedding was called off too. For my group of friends, our bachelor parties have been a couple of weeks before our respective weddings and usually involve camping, breweries, firing weapons, and steakhouses. Never exotic dance clubs or anything sleazy. I don't really understand the rationale of going to be around those kinds of people or acting like a single guy looking for women. The rude part of me wants to say that it's only acceptable if you're trashy. The less rude part wants to say people justify it with, "You'll never get to do this again, try to enjoy it one last time," or, "If you go out and don't have a desire to try and get with any of these women, it means you're truly committed to your fiancé and ready to tie the knot." But honestly, that seems like a pretty ridiculous excuse to me. Former workmate was at one where they had a stag do in Spain. After a heavy day and night of drinking, upon getting back to the hotel, they got to daring each other to jump into the pool from their second-floor balcony. The groom-to-be completely messed it up and hit the edge of the pool with his head, breaking his neck. It didn't kill him, but now he has no feeling below his upper shoulders. Nice start to married life, making yourself a paraplegic. The exotic dancer wanted to spank the groom. The groom said no. The best man said no. Other groomsmen said no. She then said, "All right, well, I'm not going to kiss another woman." We'd hired 2 of them. "Until I spank someone." Well, I'm not letting that go, so I drop my pants and she says, "Let's go." She beat the crap out of my butt. I stood up involuntarily once, she hit me so hard. I had to hide the black and blues from the wife for a week. Funnily enough, it was the second time I've had it done. The first time, the lady in question was hitting my friend with a belt and he said stop. She grabbed me and told me to be a real man, and hit me. I said, "That all you got, you C-word?" And she loved that. And then she hit me right in that spot above your butthole but below your tailbone. Oof, I didn't sit right for a week. During my brother's bachelor party, we just planned on getting drunk and playing Time Crisis 3, but we ended up getting so wasted that we spent most of our tokens on Marvel vs. Capcom and Sunset Rovers. Wild night. This is realistically about as crazy a bachelor party as most of us will ever have, I feel, and you know what? Nothing wrong with that. I would rather a cozy night in with my best pals than waking up in the buck on a building roof next to a donkey, despite how good of a story that latter one seems. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Okay, so this one is a bit complicated. I'll do my best to explain everything so everyone can keep up. In college, I dated this girl. We'll call her Trish to protect the innocent or whatever. We were together for a few years and were truly in love. She and I ended up breaking up because I was stupid and she went off and joined the military. We stayed in touch and stayed very good friends, even as she moved to Germany with the US Air Force. In Germany, she meets a guy, they fall in love and decide to get married. He is from California, so they're going to have their wedding there. Trish's dad is a giant, crystal-loving piece of crap straight out of the armpit of Alabama. So seeing as she doesn't really have any family she wants at the wedding, aside from her younger sister, Trish asks me to walk her down the aisle. Of course, I agree to do it. So, I fly to California, ready to party. I meet the groom, meet his family, and get reintroduced to Trish's sister and settle in at my hotel. The bachelor party is that night, and I really have no idea what to expect. Remember, I've never met any of these people before, and the only person I know at the entire gathering is Trish and kind of her sister. We start the night at one of those indoor, high-speed go-kart places, taking breaks in between sessions to drink tequila in the parking lot. It's dangerous and stupid, but everyone's having a blast, apart from the 18-year-old boyfriend of the groom's sister. He started the night convinced he could keep up, but the tequila got the chunks blowing out of every hole in his face by the third round of parking lot shots. He stayed with us the whole night, despite getting ill though, so credit to him for that. Next, we went to a bar. I should say at this point that I was never a big drinker before all this, so I'm just kind of along for the ride with some seriously seasoned alcoholics. We got pretty hammered there before moving on to the Exotic Dance Club. This is a seriously nice place north of San Francisco. I can't remember the name, it's been years, and it's announced that the groom is getting married tomorrow and it's his last night of freedom, blah blah blah. Instant attention for the entire group of us, about 5. The groom and the best man had set aside some serious cash for this, so there's lots of trips to the champagne room, including the one where we all get downstairs kisses from one of the nice paid ladies. There may be no full-body adult fun in the champagne room, but there is definitely mouth-to-eggplant action, Chris Rock. The night ends with us closing down the Exotic Dance Club, all of us hammered. The best man, who's a beefy military dude, sees the bouncer has a taser on his belt, and he wants to see if he can take a taser shot, but the bouncer refuses to do it. Instead, he volunteers that one of this guy's friends, us, can tase him, but the bouncer can't for liability reasons. I was hammered, and despite only knowing these guys for a few hours, I grab the taser and blast this guy in the ribs with it. Surprisingly, or maybe due to his drunkenness, he can take a taser shot. Cheers from all of us, all the tired dancers and bouncers and riffraff at the club at 4 in the morning. I was astonished and just happy I hadn't accidentally killed the person I'd just met. Everyone heads out and I ended up back at my hotel around 5 a.m. I needed to be at the wedding at 10 a.m. and I was jet-lagged from flying in from the East Coast anyway. I make it to the wedding just fine, not even hungover or anything. But wait, there's more. The wedding morning goes smoothly, aside from the best man looking rather worse for wear from his hangover and taser shot, the taser shot that he can't remember taking, but has a burn mark on his chest for some reason. As I was walking Trish down the aisle, she leans in and says, "If this doesn't work out, I can always call you, right?" I'm shocked, but I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. The rest of the wedding goes smoothly, it's really fun, and the newly married couple is really happy despite what Trish had to say to me during her last seconds of being single. I mentioned these people were seasoned drinkers, and the after-wedding party goes absolutely bonkers. Everyone is frickin' plastered again, and with the bride and her sister being the only people I really knew, I ended up hanging out with her sister for most of the night. Trish was more than a little busy, it being her wedding night and having the entire party centered around her after all. Well, Trish sees me and her sister getting along so well and asks me a favor. I have a hotel with 2 twin beds. Can I take the sister off her hands so her and her new husband can have their first night as a married couple without her around? Sure, absolutely. Well, long story short, it seems the sister had always had a crush on me and we end up doing the deed in my hotel that night. The next morning rolls around and Trish and her new husband come to the hotel to pick her up. I answer the door in a state of semi-undress and Trish knows immediately what went on. She flips right the F out. The rest of that weekend was awkward as all hell. The groom's family and friends all hate me, and now the sister is seriously pining after me like I should have expected. It's a disaster. But I fly home, a good time had, and I just chalk it up to another friendship ruined over something dumb I did. I end up staying in touch with Trish despite her wanting to murder me. A few years went by and things were back to normal, so when her husband has to visit my city on business, I invite the 2 of them to stay with me for the night. They come, meet my girlfriend, hang out, get drunk, and they generally have a nice time. They leave the next morning and all seems back to the way it was before the wedding. 6 months later, Trish wants to come visit me again, alone this time. Her husband is out on military business for an extended period and she doesn't want to sit around Germany by herself for a month. So she wants to come and visit me for a week or so. Great! She comes along and it's just like it was in college. Best friends hanging out, but with the boyfriend, girlfriend, and doing the deed part out of the question. The night before she was about to leave, we were just watching TV, and she starts sobbing. Her marriage is falling apart, her husband is a jerk, she hates her life, and she wants to stay with me. She flies back to Germany the next day. She waits for her husband to come back from his business trip and informs him that she's leaving permanently and going back to the States. I find out about all of this about a week before she's scheduled to fly into my city, with whatever belongings she has in tow. He was supposed to mail the rest of her stuff, but he never did in the end. Originally, she was going to stay with family while she figured things out, but I invite her to stay with me. We end up falling back into old habits the night she gets back and having amazing bedroom fun times. It isn't long before we agree to give it another try and we end up back together, despite my reprehensible behavior at our wedding. Skip ahead 8 years to now. We've been married for almost 6 years, we're very happy and we have an adorable 4-year-old daughter. The night before Trish and I got married, instead of a huge bachelor blowout like her first wedding, she stayed with a friend and I spent the evening alone in my apartment playing my 2 favorite video games, Resident Evil 4 and Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, before going to bed at a reasonable hour. And yes, before you ask, her sister was her maid of honor at our wedding. It should have been awkward, but everyone had a great time. In short, dated girl, broke up, agreed to walk her down the aisle at her wedding, got drunk, did the deed with a working girl's mouth, tasered a guy, did the deed with her sister, but there was a very happy, if bizarre, ending to the whole saga, and that's where my life is now. Whoa, what an epic saga! Sounds like you guys both ended up with who you were meant to be with regardless of the rocks that you hit getting there. Speaks volumes of how comfortable and accepting of each other you are that these other factors weren't lasting problems going forward, and that you had a long, happy marriage and a kid. And now, our final mega story for the night. Well, I have one, and boy is it a doozy. My friends kidnapped me for my bachelor party. We got in a car and drove down the coast to San Diego. Stopped along the way for seafood, listened to Bon Jovi and Scorpions all the way down, and had a frickin' blast. We got to the Hard Rock, of course, and immediately started drinking. I probably had half a bottle of rum before we even left the room. We went down to the pool, and my buddy yelled out, "Here's the Bachelor!" And that was it. Everyone was buying me shots. Literally, they had Jell-O shots in syringes that they plunged right into your mouth. I remember doing about 6 shots, in addition to the margarita in my hand, because mixing booze is totally a good idea, right? And then I got in the hot tub. Then I remember I couldn't find my friends. And a girl was taking me back to the elevators. And then my friends were in the room too, and I was completely undressed. Frick. The realization of what had just happened sobered me right the frick up, and I completely freaked out. I was jumping up and down in the room, completely undressed, limp manhood flopping around like a dying fish, screaming at my friends that they just let me cheat on my fiancé, and this was all their fault. They would not stop laughing. Apparently, what actually happened is that I got really drunk and started to pass out in the hot tub, so my friends escorted me back to the room to sleep it off. The girl I remember was one of my buddies who'd secured a wig during his partying and thought it was hilarious. They then showed me the wig. It was totally one of those blue and yellow Chargers wigs they wear at the football games. And the more I thought about it, it was absolutely the hair of the girl that I'd followed back to the room. Thank God. After leaving me in the room, they'd all gone back to the party to let me sleep it off, and I'd been in the room for about 3 hours, sound asleep. Somewhere after they left the room, I decided to take off all of my clothes, which is why I was completely undressed. They also showed me the several photos they took of them standing behind my exposed butt, giving thumbs up and making other obscene gestures. I'm going to be completely honest here. These are a good bunch of guys who are also jerks of the finest caliber. Much relieved, we decided it was best if we all just got dressed for dinner. It's important to note that, at this particular instant, everyone in the room, myself included, believed that I'd merely slept during the 3-hour interlude whilst I was in the room, and my friends were at the pool party. This, as we soon learned, was not the case. In preparation for the pool party earlier that day, we'd all changed out of our normal street clothes and into pool attire in the room. Among the many items left in the room as a result of the changing process were my friend's $400 pair of fine leather boots. Boots which, at that precise moment that we all decided to get dressed, were on the floor next to my bed. I put on my pants, my best man put on his shirt, another groomsman put on his suit, and our last friend stuck his foot into the first boot and discovered that it was full of the contents of someone's stomach, presumably chucked into there at great velocity as a result of too much alcohol. I believe he screamed, "What the ever-loving F," as he kicked the boot off his foot as hard as he could. Please, dear listener, take a moment to imagine how one physically kicks a boot off of one's foot. Does it shoot straight off in a lovely arc whereby any liquid, however unlikely, that might be inside of it would remain in the boot? Or does it in fact spin like a helicopter's stabilizing rotor, end over end, spraying vomitous goo upon the floor, beds, ceiling, and of course the person who kicked off said boot? Spoiler alert, it's the latter. The rest of the story is all downhill. I was spared purchasing a new pair of boots for my friend, the other boot was also full, but I did have to clean the entire room.
a task for which I somehow felt that a pile of bar coasters was an adequate tool. My friend changed out of his chuck-covered pants, showered again, and put on his jeans with his shirt and sports coat, which were miraculously unfouled. We all went out for dinner, which I was not okay to eat given the state of my stomach, and I went back to the room and slept until morning, at which point much ceremony was made of everyone checking their shoes to see if I'd chucked up again. I had not. I do regret that I missed what was, by all accounts, a great party, but I'm glad that I had what I consider to be a true bachelor party experience. Namely, I had a party so absurd that it removed from me, for quite some time, the urge to party, or even the smell of alcohol again, thereby keeping me at home with my wife and happily within the confines of my marriage bed, a sanctity which I have never, to this day, violated. I really wish I'd been awake enough to go to that exotic dance club, though. People who work at remote places, like forest officers, oil rig workers, what creepy things have you noticed while at work? I do a lot of stream work, so I spend time out in pretty rural areas walking streams and rivers. Once my coworker and I were working in a more urban environment and came across what we initially thought was a body, which of course triggered the "oh god" from us, but it ended up being a firefighter's dummy that had fallen down a hill. We felt pretty dumb. Other notable things include a small grave in the middle of nowhere for someone's dog, which was kinda sad, and a stuffed rabbit with shotty shells placed where its eyes should be, a mannequin very purposefully placed in a chair in the middle of the wood, and lots of little random altars. I also did work in Myrtle Beach, which was a hellhole, and accidentally walked into an inhabited homeless camp. I was peering into a stormwater grate when I looked up and saw a homeless person standing in his shelter, staring at us and saying nothing. I felt like I was trespassing, so we quietly left. I worked at a public forest. One day we had someone report a dead animal on the side of one of our trails. A few of us from the front desk hiked out to see what it was. It looked like a giant piece of liver, maybe? Just a pile of smooth red meat. No blood around. And it was wrapped up in a t-shirt with some coins scattered around it. We called our rangers to go check it out, and one of them was pretty sure it was placenta. The weird part is, you have to check in through a front desk, so someone either snuck a placenta or liver in, or gave live birth or removed an organ on our trails. We never got an answer on what that pile of meat was, how it got there, or why. I work on North Sea oil rigs on an ad hoc basis off the coast of Scotland. I wouldn't say anything was particularly paranormally creepy, but it can be a very unsettling and weird place. Fog can come rolling in out of nowhere, and other rigs you can see off the sides can disappear in front of your eyes. Sometimes you can't see the walkways 6 feet in front of you, or if you're walking over the grating, you can't see the sea below your feet. It's only about 60 meters down from deck to sea, but you can hear it, all of it muffled. The fog can roll in over the course of a few minutes too, so a perfectly clear day becomes pea soup. You can also feel the rig moving and swaying on the high winds and rough seas, even though it's a fixed-leg platform. Very unnerving to feel your office swaying when it shouldn't be. My last trip was my first ever night shift, and I found it particularly unsettling, as you got the background noise of the plant, but I walked around the whole rig without seeing another living soul for the whole shift. Usually there's about 130 people on board, although smaller rigs have smaller headcounts. Usually, once a trip, I'm hit by this awareness that you're just very isolated and in the middle of nowhere. Most rigs I've worked on are an hour's chopper ride from land, so if things go wrong, it can escalate very quickly. Yeah, I've thought about a lot of these sorts of jobs where you get paid a lot more because of the remoteness, loneliness, and the fact that in the very unlikely event of an emergency, you're probably screwed. Still, I have the first two already, so maybe a little danger would spice up my life. My college was located away from major cities, and the woods were all around us. That being said, there was a highly rated trail, the Loyal Sock Trail, which was about an hour drive from the university. I invited a friend to come with me as he'd never been on an extended backpacking trip, a more than 50-mile trail that we intended to backpack over the 4-day weekend. I'm an Eagle Scout who spent countless hours in the woods and went on backpacking trips consistently throughout my college experience. As many have said before, you get used to the minor spooky things happening, coyote howls, raccoons in the middle of the night, even the occasional unknown noise. The scariest thing to find in the woods, however, are people.
We were about 20 miles into the trail, and being in Pennsylvania where the underbrush and trees line the trails pretty densely, I always walk about 100 meters off the trail to reduce the chances of me disturbing people or people disturbing me, especially in the early morning when I choose to sleep in. Following that same strategy, my friend and I go out of our way to be in this amazing spot a good ways off the trail, where it would even be difficult to see our flashlights from the trail. This spot was on a peninsula where a creek met a river, meaning there was only one way into our camp and only one way out. We start a fire, cook our food, and drink some, but not enough to get either of us drunk. We put the fire out at about midnight and head into our individual tents. All is quiet. It's the fall semester, so the leaves are on the ground, and the moon is brightly shining through the bare trees, and the air is cool. The only noise is the occasional time where I'd hear my friend turn over in his sleep. And then I hear the voices. The voices sounded very close for being on the trail 100 meters away. I checked my watch. It was 3 a.m. Who hikes at 3 a.m.? We were 20 miles in. I slowly got out of my sleeping bag, unzipped my tent, only to see my friend peeking out of his tent in the exact same fashion. He quickly moves his finger over his mouth in an exaggerated hush signal, and then used the same hand to frantically motion towards the way of the trail. Then we see them. 4 adults, 3 men and 1 woman, walking directly towards our camp. No lights illuminating their path. They're walking silently at this point. Only one of them has a backpack, an impossibility for the long hike they're a third of the way through. Being a long trip, you bring woodcutting supplies to chop branches into smaller branches to burn. For me, this was a survival knife. Grabbing the knife, believing it's my only way of defending myself, I'm more disheveled than I've ever been, especially knowing that a knife is barely a defense at all. These people walk into our site, sit down by our extinguished fire pit, and just sit there for what feels like an eternity. My friend speaks up and asks what they're doing in our campsite. Without answering the question, they ask if we have any food. Having packed as lightly as possible for the long trip, we had only then a few extra Mountain House MRE-style meals. I grab one out of my bag and toss it to one of the men. In rapid succession, I ask why they aren't using a light, if they need help finding the trail, and why they are hiking so late. They respond with the following: "We don't use lights, we know where the trail is, and it's better to hike late at night." Unnerved at this point, my friend asks them to leave. They respond by asking if we want to light the fire and hang out for a bit. No, we don't. They grab their bag, get up, and leave without speaking another word. We watch them leave and take shifts, making sure that they didn't come back. Needless to say, we both got very little sleep that night. When the sun rose the next morning, we finally got some real shut-eye. By the afternoon when we woke up, it all felt like a weird dream of sorts. The only evidence was a fuzzy cap that they must have dropped that I have to this day. I've never had something as weird or spooky as that happen in the woods, and I hope to never have it happen again. In the 8 years since that trip, I haven't been back to the Loyal Sock Trail. I have a bunch of friends that love to do mushrooms. This definitely sounds like something they'd do. I used to be a supervisor for a janitorial company, and a couple of times a week I had to go to a middle school and clean their hallway floors and gymnasium with a Zamboni-type vehicle that mopped and scrubbed the floor. When I was there, I had the whole school to myself. I used to get finished quickly and go to the library and read while eating my dinner. Well, one morning after being there, I got a call from school security and they wanted me to come in. When I got there, I saw a police car too. Uh-oh, I think. They asked me a few questions like, "Did you notice anything out of the ordinary or strange while you were here last night?" No, I hadn't. I usually have my headphones in. Security then shows me camera footage of someone breaking into one of the classrooms while I was riding the Zamboni not far away. I was there for another 2 hours. Nothing was stolen, but the worst part was they didn't have footage of the person leaving. They didn't go out the way they came in, and police had to sweep the entire school. Never did find out what happened with that one. I think someone needs to go check up on the person who wrote this comment because as far as I'm concerned, there's a non-zero chance he's being haunted by a phantom and may have been cursed or something in his subsequent shifts at the school. I used to work on a ship and we're usually gone 3 to 10 months at a time. I work night shifts, so this meant I could sleep in the sleeping quarters during daytime with either just me or a handful of other crew members, where usually there'd be 20 to 30 of us in there. It wasn't so bad. Actually, I really liked it because it's a lot more peaceful sleeping during the day. You don't hear anyone else snoring or someone's footsteps because they get up in the night to pee or anything like that. All you can hear is the light creak of the walls and the floors of the ship, and all you can feel is the sway of it on the ocean. A bit haunting and creepy if you really think about it, but I like it. All of that ended when there was a short period of time where there were only two of us sleeping in the room. At least that's what I thought. I started hearing light taps across the room. At first they were light taps, then it would get a bit faster, and sometimes a bit louder. I'd ignore it if it wasn't so utterly annoying. I looked at where the other guy was sleeping and he seems to be fast asleep, accompanied by his light snoring. Second day, there it goes again. I tried to follow the sound, but for some reason it bounced around the room like an echo. Eventually, it comes to an abrupt halt, so I tried to sleep it off. During the night shift, I tried to ask the other guy if he had heard it, but he said he was too tired to even notice. I guess I'm alone in this pursuit. On the third day, I take my pursuit one step further by not sleeping right away. I'd be fully awake when it started, so I'll have a better chance of discovering the source. And there it goes again. This time I go from one empty rack to the next, until finally it was loud as heck, tapping in progress. My heart was thumping like a jackhammer. I pulled the curtain to one side. There lay the biggest dude I've seen on the ship, holding his manhood mid-stroke. You have no idea the speech I'd prepared for this guy in my head for keeping me up for several days, but at that exact moment I had no idea what to say. Of course, I gave out a small yelp, which didn't help the situation. I never thought I'd be locking eyes with another guy while he's gripping his eggplant while I begin this honorable pursuit. With the current situation, I mustered my best attempt at displaying my irritation. It somehow came out as an apology, followed by, "I keep hearing tapping noises." He hadn't said anything yet, but at that exact moment I realized his elbow, which belonged to the working arm, was resting right on the wall, probably banging on it over and over and over. I didn't wait for a reply. I nodded my head, kind of rolled my eyes, and walked away. It will never be easy trying to avoid a big guy like him every day in the same sleeping quarters. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. On our drill ship that was built in China, we noticed on the blueprints that there was a room. We went to look at it and couldn't find an entrance, but the spacing was obvious that there was an extra room. It might not sound so creepy unless you've been in these shipyards where two things are known to happen. Stowaways, although I doubt that was the case, but also hundreds of workers at any given time just following orders blindly. So we confirmed that the room had all 6 sides, yet not a single weld on the outside. There's only one way this could have happened, and I'm sure you're starting to get it now. They must have welded from the inside for this room and then realized they had no way out upon completion if the gases hadn't killed them first. It's extremely heavy around that room. People say they hear things. I definitely have. This isn't some old ship either. I rode this ship from China to Amsterdam after completion, and then the maiden voyage to America. I guess it happens quick. So that's where the monster that will eventually break out and lead to a really great horror event aboard the ship is being kept. I can't wait to find out what it is, although I do hope that the Netflix movie holds up to the real events. When I was 15 years old, I was doing my 4 a.m. newspaper delivery round on my bicycle. I was driving into the garden of this one subscriber where I saw 2 guys with flashlights looking through the windows of the house. I was kind of in shock and just said, "Good morning, guys." They were just as much in shock, and an awkward silence followed. I tried to break the silence by asking if I could pass them to deliver the newspaper through the door, and one of the guys said the person living in that house did something to his family, and they took it as an opportunity to get away in their car that was still running. When they were gone, I rang the doorbell at the house to tell them what had happened, and they should keep an eye out. This is kind of how you end up like that kid in Breaking Bad. We were wrapping up for the day in northern Canada. I was fueling up the side boom. I was all by myself at this point because I was tired of listening to the laborers whine about the cold, so I told them I'd take care of the rest. Think bulldozer with no blade, but a giant metal boom on the side that we used to raise and lower the pipe. It was February, so pitch black. I keep hearing some weird sound. I can't quite hear it because the pump is too loud. I search around a couple of times and see nothing. I get in the truck and take off and drive past the front of the side boom to see a cougar sitting on top of a pile of dirt 15 feet away. The damn thing was just watching me there and probably could have ended me without even realizing it. I've never seen a cougar in the wild before, and it's hard to understand just how big they are and how powerful until you get up close to one. That thing leapt off the 6-foot pile and probably didn't touch the ground for 15 to 20 feet. It's terrifying to think something so big and powerful could just be sitting there, deciding if they want to make you dinner. I'm not sure if this counts, but I'm a teacher at an urban public school and was at work late grading and packing for the next day. Time had kind of flown by, and before I knew it, it was 7 p.m. I started packing up to leave in a building that is, in theory, locked and empty besides me, when our Alice alarm goes off, indicating an armed intruder in the building. I am 1. Alone, 2. Young, and 3. Freaked as hell because I am absolutely not ready to fight a weapon-toting madman over my lesson plans. I book it out of the school and dive into my car, hearing the alarm blaring the entire time. I peel out of the parking lot and can see in my rear view the alarm lights still flashing and debate never going back, because screw that. Turns out they were doing routine maintenance and didn't send out an email to the teachers. My mum used to live in a small town in the Cascade Mountains and worked as a forest ranger. The creepiest thing that happened was when the oldest male ranger kept hitting on her and trying to get her to come home with him. Not very out of the ordinary, but many years later, after she'd left the town, she found out he'd been convicted of manslaughter and had killed a young female ranger right before she got hired. She probably would have been his next target. I worked as the county historic preservationist in southern Appalachia, working on the buildings and properties the county owned. One of the benefits included with my job was living on site at one of the historic properties. The historic house was an imposing brick mansion built in the 1810s, and I lived in a small caretaker's house about 20 feet away. This was in the backwoods, so to deter trespassing and vandalism, the county had built an 8-foot-tall fence around the entire 5-acre parcel and put barbed wire on top of the fence. I mention all of this just to show it was basically impossible for anyone or anything to jump or climb over the fencing and onto the property. One night, after working late at another property, I pulled up to my entrance gate, let myself in, locked it behind me, and then drove the 100 yards down the gravel road to my house. There were no lights on the property, so I could only see by my headlights. As I turned my car around the corner of one of the outbuildings and parked it, my lights shone on a thing that I still have a hard time describing effectively. It was the size of a deer, but with long spindly legs and long shaggy hair. Almost like a taller maned wolf, if you've ever seen pictures of one of those. That alone shook me, as there's no way something of that size should have been able to get through or over my fencing. What follows is absolutely true. I got out of my car to get a better look at what the heck that thing was, and as I opened the door and got out, the thing took off running away. Not on 4 legs, but on 2. I literally watched this thing raise its back up, stand at full height on its back legs, and sprint away. I absolutely freaked out at that point. I grabbed my mag light and my shotty from inside and tried to find the thing again. There was no trace, no tracks or anything. I have no idea how it got in or out of my property. I didn't sleep at all that night. I just sat on my couch with my shotty, watching the front door, hoping that whatever I saw didn't come back and burst in. I can't explain what the heck I saw that night, but it still raises hair on my neck every time I think about it. And that would be the story of how I quit that job, because I think if you stick around, your only career advancement is going to be mauled corpse found by the protagonist later with the exposition diary warning them to run. I think I'll wait for a better part, thank you. My oldest brother used to work the overnight sprinklers on a golf course. He took me out one time just for fun, and as we were driving uphill on a fairway, a figure of a lady appeared in the headlights at the top of the hill. My brother steered a little to the left of her and kept driving right on by. I stared right into her eyes as we drove past, and she stared back. Her eyes glowed like a cat in the night. As soon as we were out of voice range, I asked my brother, "Who the hell was that?" He calmly responded, "Oh yeah, she lives on the golf course and likes to terrorize the workers from time to time. I usually see her out here once a week." Alright, cool. When I was a kid living in Queensland, Australia, I used to bush bash, meaning walk off the beaten track through thick scrub. I knew the national park my house backed onto like the back of my hand. I knew from the topography where I was at all times. Both of my parents were ex-military and had a sort of hands-off approach, trusting me even as young as 12 to venture off on my own into the wilderness. So I could just pack a lunch, and my sister and neighborhood friend would come with. We'd head off early in the morning, returning just before sunset, usually. Once, when I, the eldest, was about 14, we'd been following creek beds and bashing over heavily forested hills towards an area I'd never been. We came down a hill, through a gully full of ferns, and followed a dry creek bed for another hour. The sides of the creek became steep and rocky. Before long, we were passing through a gorge. As we emerged from the gorge, we noticed what looked like a dwelling. Being idiot kids, we wanted to see what was up.
It looked abandoned at first, but as we got closer we saw that tarps had been affixed to a ramshackle structure. Chicken wire surrounded what looked like a pen just outside. As my eyes traveled across it, I suddenly caught another pair of eyes looking directly back at me. A Rottweiler. We started slowly edging back away from the property, but it was too late. The dog started going nuts, and worried that it was coming after us, or at least alerting the person living in the hut, we bolted. I went back to the area a few times, but not too close to the abode itself, and found discarded bones from small game and other bits and pieces, spent 22 casings and a few other things. As an adult and knowing the area, it's very likely we stumbled across a homeless person camping out or a crystal lab, as the area, as I'd find out as an adult, was absolutely riddled with crystal labs. Some friends and I were fishing a small pond just after dark for catfish. We started to hear sounds coming off the water like someone was throwing softball-sized rocks, but they were coming from all over the pond. We thought someone was messing with us and we called out a few times for them to stop, but we eventually got freaked out and left. Cut to a few years later, I'm fishing a different pond and hear the same sound. Turns out it was a beaver slapping its tail on the water to drive me from its territory. When beavers become problems in rivers, they relocate them to ponds in town. I've been fishing out in the Gulf of Mexico where they have some oil rigs. This rig wasn't being used, from what we knew, so we'd get pretty close to it to fish for red snapper. While we were out there, we could have sworn we heard screams of a woman over and over. It was some crap, but the explanation was the wind making the noises as it blew through the rig. Well, that's what we were told, but it totally creeped us the F out. I work as a polar bear guard, as in I escort people across tundra and mountains and protect them from polar bears. I once saw a snowman totem with reindeer antlers coming out of his head. It was deformed, full of bullet holes, and rather creepy. I spent a summer in Wyoming going to BLM land and lots of other remote locations, collecting data on bats and herpetofauna. Heard a lot of weird noises like mountain lions screaming, deer snorting, and what sounded like owls fighting. Woke up one morning to find 2 bull moose sleeping 20 yards behind my tent. All of this was part of the job, until one night a truck was driving towards us when we were on a BLM square in the southwestern part of the state. The truck was going overland on no road and was slowly driving at us. It stopped about 100 yards away, turned off the lights, and we could see a person get out. They walked a full circle around us at 100 yards away, got back in the truck, and turned around. This was after dark, and the shadowy figure did a complete circle around us. You could hear them walking through the sagebrush, and I'm sure they could hear us talking. We packed up after that and drove to a hotel an hour away. I called the office and told them I was taking a weapon when we went back out. I didn't like having the bear mace as our only defense. What's the wildest, so where are they now, revelation about someone from your past? I googled my first grade crush and discovered a long list of arrests and his untimely death a few months ago. This was written in 2012. The first girl I ever had a big crush on in 6th or 7th grade believes that December 21st really is the end of the world. Last I checked, she had moved to Brazil, bought a house, a used Porsche, and racked up 30 to 40 grand in credit card debt. She hasn't worked a day in just over a year. December 22nd is going to be a rough day for a lot of people. Went to middle school with this really cute girl, but she had some emotional problems. She'd cry a lot and always get into trouble. 20 years later, I get a hold of her after my divorce because I don't know why. She's beaten cancer and is very well adjusted. We're dating now. Couldn't be happier. My dad looked up someone he used to be good friends with when he was younger. Turns out he's the creator of a game called Club Penguin, and he sold that game to Disney and got around $100 million. My dad's neighbor and childhood friend went ape on his entire family with a hatchet. A friend who everyone thought was an idiot is now a millionaire. I'm really happy for him. I never thought he was an idiot.
You can still be an idiot and be a millionaire, by the way.
Some guy I went to school with did a surfing trip around the world, sold his stuff and settled down on some island halfway around the world, I can't remember the name of where. He became intimate with one of the natives, lived on a beach, and sold dream catchers to tourists. Go figure. A year or two back, I googled my best friend from 2nd and 3rd grade, someone I hadn't seen in about 30 years, and my last memory of whom was us playing with our Han Solo and Boba Fett action figures. He's an executive at Pixar. It was about then that my midlife crisis went into full swing. And you know what? Fair enough. When you have that to compare yourself to, a little bit of ruminating and future panicking is fair enough. Luckily for me, my friends are all just as big a group of losers as I am. There was a guy that I wrestled in high school when he was a freshman who ended up being the 3-time state champion. Everyone said he could wrestle at any college in the nation. I googled his name a couple of years ago and found out he was in prison for committing the unspeakable act against his best friend's mother while he was intoxicated. I bumped into someone that I knew from high school who'd always been a bit of an aloof jerk, but I didn't have much contact with him. I didn't recognize him initially because he acted very spaced out and had some serious facial scarring going on. I found out from another friend that since I'd last seen him, he'd dropped out of university, moved to Paris, where he'd taken quite a heroic amount of substances, and taken over someone else's religion/cult. He tried to convince his parishioners that they could all fly, and demonstrated this from a window on the second floor. Hence the facial scarring. Whenever I feel like an underachiever compared to other schoolmates, I think of this guy. But to be fair, he was the leader of a cult. High school friend who graduated in 2010 with a 1-year-old child, waiting for her boyfriend to be released from prison so they could get married. He was convicted for doing the unspeakable act on another girl. One of my best friends in high school is now in the biggest rock band in my country. Every time I see him on TV in his slick rock outfits, I see the 16-year-old him, ponytail in his neck, old woolen sweater to his knees and army boots. I texted him yesterday when he played a live show on TV. I got a text back about 1 minute after they'd finished. It's very surreal. This one kid I knew in high school always seemed like he was a few cans shy of a six-pack. Sweet guy, but he always acted like he had been hitting the wacky tobacco a bit hard, and in general he seemed a bit inane. Fast forward to now, I friended him on Facebook and it turns out he's a local newscaster with a journalism degree and competes in professional ballroom dancing. He constantly posts really smart, witty things, and in general has his life together, way more than I would have expected. Chatting with him, I learned that he never really felt like he had any need to be himself in high school because people were so shallow anyway. So he played a monkey-like character, and at home practiced his ballroom dancing, wrote articles for online publications under a pseudonym, and, I can only assume, sat around listening to classical music, wearing a top hat and monocle, and sipping scotch like a sir. You just never really know people. Oh god, I have a list. 2 of my high school classmates became Olympic gymnasts. 1 high school crush had a nervous breakdown and brandished a knife at a police officer, who shot her. She survived and eventually opened a massage parlor in Vegas. A high school classmate, who I always thought was a bit of a jerk, became a police officer. He's currently in prison for participating in a drive-by shooting. And a childhood friend moved away and we lost touch. He became an actor playing Bulk on Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. I found out a few months ago my brother's friend in middle school I used to play GoldenEye with in my basement founded this little website called Reddit, Alexis Ohanian. I went to check up on my ex. We weren't very serious and it ended amicably, but didn't keep in touch, partly due to me moving across the ocean. I went to look her up earlier this year and found out she died in a car crash because she wasn't wearing a seatbelt. Weird feeling, but I feel worse for her daughter who now has to grow up without a mother. I recently found my best friend from 2nd grade on Facebook and discovered she's now a very proud exotic dancer. This is fine and all, but what was shocking is that when we were kids, I was the overtly weird and flirty one. She was so innocent that this discovery was kind of jarring. I've been debating whether or not to just show up at the club, buy a lap dance, and make it awkward. A very nice kid I went to middle school with took a bunch of substances and then beat 2 homeless people to death with his bare hands. He did this when he was 16. Oof. I used to know this girl growing up. Her parents knew my parents, so even though she was a few years younger, we spent a lot of time together. She was tall and lanky, super awkward and shy. 15 years later, my parents tell me she won some kind of modeling competition, married an older guy in the industry that she met on the show, which was Vegas Wedding with Elvis, and moved to California. Apparently, he's got serious money, so she doesn't work, but he flies her friends over from Sweden regularly so she doesn't get bored or lonely. There's this 30-year age gap, but apparently it's true love and they're both very happy. Not as crazy as some stories here, but I had a friend during my teenage years that I nearly hung out with on the daily. We always hung around in skate parks and did a lot of green herb together and had a good time. She was a good friend, but moved away at 17. I lost contact with her, which is partially my fault, but that's another story. Contacted her about 2 years ago, asking if she wanted to hang out and smoke a bit, like in the old days. I got a response and we met and started smoking some green herb.
She looked me in the eyes and told me, "I should tell you, I am a cop nowadays." It was kind of strange to see my old friend that was into the punk scene and generally didn't like cops too much, being a cop. My secret crush from middle school grew up and became Pink. Dear Pink, well done, Alicia. This is why I kept it secret. I totally knew you outclassed me. Yeah, I reckon you should have shot your shot back then. What's the worst that could happen? They write a song about what a lame, limp, poorly endowed boyfriend you were, and just have your name be the title of the song. Oh, actually, maybe you did the best thing. I'm a bit late to the game, but this girl I went to school with ended up in LA making adult movies. The twist is that she's using my real name as her adult film star name. My name is really not that common, and while we were friends in school, she'd told me a few times that she really liked my name. It's very strange to Google her and see her mid-deed amidst a gaggle of strangers with my name. She and I went out a few times in high school, but nothing came of it. I ran into her years later and talked briefly, exchanged contact info, and parted. I asked her out, but she kept putting it off, and eventually I stopped asking. Maybe I was never the kind of guy she was interested in and didn't know how to properly say no, so maybe she gave excuses, hoping that I'd get the hint. I looked her up sometime later and found out she had changed her last name. Not terribly uncommon when someone gets married. Oh, so she's got married. Well, good for her, I guess, I think. I'll just go out to check out her Facebook profile and yep, there's an album of honeymoon pictures. And oh, there's her wife. So that explains a lot. I found out my first grade guy crush is currently a woman. I've tried to look up my first love a number of times over the last few years, but for a long time she did a good job of keeping her info off the internet. Last year, however, I found some information I'd rather not have found. She went on an alcoholic bender, got kicked out of the Navy, I think, had a kid, and had been arrested at least twice for multiple counts of theft and being a working girl. I always wonder how things might have been different if I'd moved across country with her when she wanted me to 10 years ago. Sadly, she put me in a position where I just couldn't do that. 2 weeks' notice to leave my hometown without a plan or money just wasn't something I could do at that age. Wherever you are now, I hope your life is better than it seems from the outside looking in. One of my good friends in grade school was raised by extremely religious and uptight parents. We're talking the kind of parents who wouldn't let us play Final Fantasy because it had magic in it, and that was the work of the devil. He moved away in like 6th grade. I found him on MySpace back when that was the main social media thing. The guy is now about as flamboyantly gay as can possibly be. I'm sure his parents are thrilled. My best friend from 5th grade is in the new 90210 series and also voiced Anakin Skywalker in the Clone Wars cartoon. I grew up with a girl from elementary school to grade 11. We were never close, but we had a bunch of classes together. Decently connected with my family. Smart, beautiful, popular. Her mum was great too, used to clean our elementary school in the mornings. I haven't seen her in a few years, but I found out her mum had been going crazy, till the point where she walked up behind the girl and slit her throat. Nicked her carotid artery, but thankfully she made it. Caught her mum and she's being charged. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I visited New Zealand a while back, I stopped by a bookstore and picked up an old hardback copy of Lord Jim by Joseph E. Conrad, dated 1928, with a "To Lennox Douglas from J.E.C." on the first page. If you're not familiar with Lord Jim, the gist of the plot is as follows. A young man is crewing a ratty old transport ship when it has an accident and is expected to sink. The crew, including Jim, pile into the only lifeboat and escape. However, the boat doesn't sink, and they're all put on trial and labeled cowards for life. Jim spends his years trying to be a good and brave man in the far corners of the world to atone. And he dies young in a blaze of glory, so to speak. Anyway, I googled Lennox Douglas. 13 to 14 years after receiving this book as a gift, he found himself serving as a crew member on a transport ship in a convoy trying to evacuate Allied troops from Greece. The Luftwaffe sank his ship. 2 destroyers stayed behind to help survivors of the wreck, and both of them were also sunk within hours. There were virtually no survivors. The lifeboats were all strafed and sunk as well. So I guess I honestly don't know how to feel. I haven't figured out the moral yet. It's not just coincidence. It's not appropriate. It's just bizarre and unsettling and sad. Maybe a little toast for bravery.
A friend of mine who got me started on my wild, substance-fueled, debaucherous life in my late teens, no regrets, I had a great time, one day decided he'd go to LA and become a rich and famous rock star. No internet back then, so we didn't stay in touch. I was fully expecting to see him on TV one day. He was that kind of guy. Hot, persistent, and ruthless. In the nicest way possible. But it never happened. When I went to visit my hometown last year, I met his sister. She told me he had been gone for about 5 years without ever contacting his family. Then he came back, nice and smiling but not answering any questions. Instead, he made a big fire in the garden, burned all of his belongings, and went on to become a monk in a monastery. I still wonder what happened there. I googled my Chinese ex-girlfriend and came up with hundreds of people who were not her. A couple of weeks ago, I got a spam text for e-cigs. It showed up like a real number, had my first name in the message, and was signed with Johnny, which caught me off guard. That was the name of one of my dealers and good friends from college that I hadn't spoken to in a couple of years. So I went to check his Facebook page, thinking maybe one of our mutual friends gave him my number and he was messing with me. Turns out he passed away in June. No idea what happened, but his page was flooded with condolences and memories and such. I cried when I saw a post from his dad about the funeral. We didn't exactly end on great terms, but he was a nice guy and was always there to cheer people up. Rest in peace, Johnny. My aunt gave up a child for adoption because of how young she was when he was born. 20 years later, we found out he became an NFL player for the Chargers. Well, I can't say I condemn anyone in this. It seems like he did well enough with the upbringing he got, even if he definitely doesn't have to thank her for dumping him. And if she was too young to raise a kid and had a good adoption system set up, great, as long as she doesn't go trying to grub any favors off him. I'm from the suburbs of Chicago, and I had the same best friends since 6th grade. One went MIA when we went to college. I still remember the last time I saw him. We were at my grandparents' cottage in Indiana. It was me, Mike, my freshman year roommate, my 2 other buddies, and my girlfriend. It was the day before we were all leaving, so we were going to take the pontoon out to the sandbar for a few hours. I asked Mike if he wanted to go, but he was sleeping, so he said no. The rest of us went out and were there for a few hours when here comes Mike heading for us on the wave runner. He pulls up to us and says, "Hey guys, I'm leaving," and turned around and headed up into the sunset on the wave runner. I tried calling or texting or going by his house, and he was just never there or never answered. It's been 2.5 years since I've seen him. We're all seniors now. I found out this past summer he's studying nuclear engineering in Louisiana and working part-time on an oil rig. Kid I went to high school with, unspeakable act registry, there for the worst sort of that particular crime too. I can't say the word on YouTube. I have a better one, but it's more of a where were they then? My biological father pieced out when I was in maybe 6th grade. When I was about 24, I hadn't seen him since. I lived on the other side of the country from my hometown. I was in a band with some friends and we called ourselves Delta 9, short for Delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol. Anyways, I decided to Google the name to see if any other bands were using that name. Being on the green herb at the time, I soon lost myself in the Google results and was just reading interesting stuff about green herb. I happened across an Amazon link. It turned out to be my father's dissertation on the effects of THC on mice. I had no idea. Pregnant, 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 married, married, pregnant, dead, dead, graduated college and doing quite well for himself, dropped out of high school, semi-successful DJ, pregnant. There was this one kid I was an absolute jerk to back in primary school. That's elementary school for you Americans. Not just me, but the entire class just picked on this one guy for some god-unknown reason. I can't remember it, but it was bad. So bad it got to the point where I threw a stick at him and split his mouth open. I felt absolutely terrible the moment I threw the stick, but everyone laughed at him whilst he screamed on the floor, blood pouring out of his mouth. So I dragged him off to the nurse, told her what I'd done, and got detention for a week. Well deserved to me, I think. Now, this kid wasn't exactly the best-looking kid around, but who was at 9 years old? Lots of puppy fat, smelled a bit funny, and was just a bit awkward. After the incident, I talked to him a bit more, and he turned out to be really nice. I lost contact with him when I moved school 2 weeks later. 10 years pass and I accidentally bump into him at the shops. I didn't even recognize the guy. He knew me though, and he got handsome as F. No homo, but the guy was good looking, well-dressed, lean, and just incredibly happy. All I could say was how sorry I was about throwing that stick a decade ago, but he brushed it off and laughed like it never happened.
He was going great in life and actually thanked me for being a jerk to him. Apparently, if myself and the other guys hadn't bullied him, he probably would have stayed the same person as he was before. Now, I definitely don't condone any form of bullying, as I've been on both ends of the shtick, no pun intended, but I was glad he'd risen so far above me and become this fantastic guy. I really hope he succeeds in life, he genuinely deserves it. As for me, I can only hope I'll end up as good a person as him. When I was 16 or 17, I was hanging out with this really strange kid every now and then. He was a racist, fascist, Third Reich enthusiast with a huge interest and great taste in everything 60s, 70s, and 80s music, and an awesome collection of music original reel-to-reel audio tapes with an accompanying awe-inspiring collection of old recorders. He used to go on and on about the N-words, and then went on in starry-eyed admiration of Jimi Hendrix, and managed to make a seamless transition to how great the leader of the Third Reich was, all while trying to keep toning down his sentiments to appease my really liberal left-wing views. One of the most messed up and twisted people I've ever known. And of course, he did substances. Lots and lots of substances. Alcohol, speed, white snow, molly, just about everything else you can think of in quantities I've never seen in my entire life. And he went through tons of the stuff in every evening, popping pills like Smarties. He constantly got in trouble with his parents, brother, the cops, a lot of shady characters. Never finished anything, school or several apprenticeships, failed all of them. He sometimes moved in with his grandma, sometimes his parents, always until someone kicked in the door and raided the place. Sometimes the cops, sometimes someone he had beef with, or occasionally even himself when he forgot where he had his keys. One of the most effed up people you can imagine, but he was fun to hang out with, every 2 months or so, as he was kind of exhausting as well. I occasionally met him on my way to or from work when I was older, always when he was drunk or on something else, while he himself was on his way to or from work as well. And then I lost contact and no one else heard from him, so I figured he had to be in prison, rehab, or dead. Either was imaginable or preferable to his regular lifestyle. A couple of weeks ago, I learned he's married and building a house. Boom, went my mind. I think I actually have a really interesting one. I was friends with this guy named Willie in junior high. He was my only friend there. We were close but lost contact after I moved a couple of cities over. Flash forward 5 years and my sister starts dating this guy who's my age. I meet him and lo and behold, it's my old friend from junior high. Except he's changed. He's obviously on something. I spotted it almost immediately as I walked in. I noticed the pockmarks from injections. It turns out my friend from junior high was now dating my sister and is addicted to smack. Fast forward 18 months and now he's wanted for grand larceny. So this isn't someone I actually looked up, I just heard it on the grapevine, but it's a pretty weird story. A guy from my secondary school class had moved to Australia, presumably for work, and while he was there, he evidently got a bit lonely. He hired a working girl, but got a bit of a shock when he discovered that she was in fact a pre-op transsexual. Somehow he didn't discover this until after they had done the deed. In a poorly thought-out act of revenge, he stole her handbag, which contained her passport. She was Indonesian, and he sent her a text demanding $100,000 for the handbag and passport back. So, what was her response to this? She called the frickin' cops. He was arrested and charged with theft and extortion. Moral of the story, don't try to extort people who haven't done anything illegal because they'll just call the cops, you jerk. In short, a guy moved to Australia and slept with a working girl, got freaked out when he discovered she was transsexual and stole her passport and demanded $100,000 for it back. She called the cops and had him arrested. What's the cringiest thing you've seen a bride and groom do for their wedding? At a classmate's wedding, they were young, maybe like 22 or 23, there's apparently a caking tradition in some parts of the country where they cut the wedding cake and the couple feed each other a bit and smear each other's faces with cake as a joke. The bride had made it 1,000% clear to the groom she did not want to be caked. And he did it anyways. Not just a little smear, but full-on smushed the slice in her face. She was stunned initially, and then got up, face full of cake, and yelled, "You butthole! I told you not to do that!" Then ran to the back area in reception. The groom tried to follow, but the bridesmaids and mother of the bride stopped him dead. So he sat at the head table awkwardly while half the wedding party rushed off with the bride. She stayed back there for like an hour. They eventually did let him back there to check on her, and we could hear her crying and them arguing. The rest of the reception came to a screeching halt until one of the bride's aunts emerged and directed the servers to clear the tables and put on some music. They got divorced 2 years later. The bride showed up almost 2 hours late to her own wedding. Southern California in an open field, no water and no shade. She shows up and wants to get married in her yoga outfit, and the groom shuts this down, and when she refuses to change her clothes, the groom decides to leave her looking stupid and they never got married. I've now spoken with my uncle, and it turns out he had speculation that his fiancée was sleeping with her personal trainer. When she showed up in her yoga outfit, it was all he needed to call off the wedding. She ended up married to her personal trainer and divorced again. The groom gave a speech thanking everyone for coming that devolved in the space of about 2 minutes into a straight-up roast of his new brother-in-law. They were friends, and the brother-in-law seemed to take it in good humor, but there's only so much implication of, "I'm gonna be railing your sister tonight," that you can take before it becomes really cringy. It didn't help that A, I barely knew anyone there because I was a +1, and B, I was on the table with the elderly relatives from that side of the family who were less than amused. They sang their vows to each other. Neither of them had a singing voice. The vows were generally bat-crap crazy, like being submissive in the bedroom and not asking about where she was going. The auto-tune microphones were a terrible idea. Their vow songs shared a chorus, and it was awful, and they expected the guests to sing along with the chorus. And the vow singing lasted 20 minutes. Pure cringe. Look, I can deal with most of that as it's their special day and we need to facilitate them as much, if not more, than they facilitate their guests on the day, and I'll even try to smile and gag on the truth as I tell you how wonderful it was, but the point where you lose me is the 20 frickin' minutes. That's absolutely horrific. I wasn't a guest, I was just working the wedding. The bride got drunk and sat on some other guy's lap for 2 hours and flirted with him while the groom sat by himself at the head table with a defeated look on his face. Does dying on the inside count regarding the "until death do us part" clause? Because he might have an out that way. They invited all their friends and expected 700 people, and like less than 100 showed up. This one wasn't the bride and groom's fault, but the pastor marrying them talked about his marriage and his kids for 20 minutes. He was obviously going for something and showing what marriage will be like, but he went on talking about his daughter Kelsey learned to walk this way and his other daughter's first words were this and that he and his wife made love throughout the house because that's what you do when you're in love. The bride and the groom had to stand there holding hands for 20 minutes right in front of him as the other 150 of us had to listen about his bedroom life and his kids. The groom sang his vows. I honestly had to stare at the floor and slow breathe to not laugh and get through it. Okay, I'd forgotten about this because it was like 25 years ago, but I went to a wedding where the bride did something similar. The thing was, she was so nervous she actually chucked up before singing her song, right there at the front of the church. Luckily, she had moved off to the side to sing. They'd set up a little separate stage there. So she blew chunks, sang her song, someone ran in and cleaned it up pretty quickly, and then they did the vows. The funny part is we'd all kind of moved on and didn't think about it during the ceremony at all, which went really well until the kiss. And then the whole crowd groaned in unison. They bought an apple orchard after leaving the city for a simpler life, and really doubled down on the apple theme for the wedding. Apples everywhere, on the tables, in baskets, all around the venue, on the podium where they got married, pictures of apples hanging everywhere, small fake trees with apples tossed under them. The guy marrying them had an apple tie on, apples somehow incorporated into every dish for the reception, and the cake was shaped like an apple. It was really frickin' bizarre. They sold the orchard a couple of years later because they had no idea what they were doing with the place. When I was in high school, one of my hockey teammates had a kid with his girlfriend when they were juniors. They decided to get married, and the wedding was officiated by my teammate's dad, who also happened to be our head coach. The entire wedding was the bride and groom's direct family and the hockey team at a Golden Corral. Then the reception was at the same Golden Corral. Then we had a hockey game that night. The other team we played that night somehow found out about it and hounded the guy the whole time. They were a bunch of jerks. An acquaintance I knew where the pastor marrying them told the couple to divorce their friends under the promise that it would make them a stronger couple or some crap like that. And they followed that advice. So pretty much after the wedding and reception, they just never again talked to any of the friends they'd invited to celebrate their big moment. I thought they'd be divorced within a year, but turns out they're still together. But yeah, apparently married couples aren't allowed to have friends? I've worked over 200 weddings at the same venue. Many couples wanted fireworks, and we had a company that would always do a show.
The couple always, without fail, would pick Firework by Katy Perry to play during the show. The ceremony was also the name reveal. They changed their last name because they didn't want to be stuck to their heritage and didn't want anything to hold them back. Turns out they changed their name thinking they could erase their mountains of debt or at least hide from it. Turns out you can't live under two legal identities. Oh, I have two. First, the bride decided to sing as she walked down the aisle. She wasn't a particularly talented singer, and she was singing over a Carrie Underwood song so we could all hear the original vocal track. She finished walking about halfway through the song, and then stood there and sang the rest of the song at the groom, and all we could do was sit there and watch. And the second? Well, at a different wedding, they began the wedding with the groom playing an out-of-tune guitar and singing to the bride. They were sitting on chairs in front of everyone, legit 400 people, and the bride was clearly uncomfortable, which made everyone else uncomfortable. That wedding also included a foot-washing ceremony, and when the bride put her shoes back on, she tripped on her dress and fell flat on her face. They hadn't done the vows yet, and the ceremony stopped for 20 minutes to deal with the nosebleed that she had given herself. Man, there's a surprising amount of weddings where the couples in question just decide that they're going to take advantage of everyone's goodwill and become musical stars for one day, huh? Gotta respect the drive, even if it sounds like the ones that do this really can't sing and seem to carry it on for a tortuous amount of time. 20 minutes seems to be the average. Bride takes 3 hours to appear. After the ceremony, she and her spouse go up in an air balloon, and that marriage did not last a year. My cousin and his wife are super religious and may be the two most awkward people I've ever met. They did one of those fake-out first dances where it starts with a slow song and then transitions to a dance number with an upbeat song. Not only is that naturally cringeworthy, the upbeat song was 5 minutes long, and they just kept repeating the same moves over and over for what felt like an eternity. There was no booze allowed at the wedding, so there was nothing to dull the pain. Flew away in a helicopter at the end, but there were only appetizers for food. My own wedding. My brother and our wedding band surprised us with a beautiful rendition of a very romantic song by a guy called Juan Luis Guerra, and it just so happened to be me and the missus's favorite song ever. Lots of happy crying and one of the best memories from that day. Unfortunately, my mother-in-law doesn't like to be one-upped, so she impromptu just got a distant second cousin from her side of the family who we didn't know to immediately sing My Heart Will Go On from Titanic. He was not a good singer and used a crappy YouTube karaoke track, and it led to a very awkward, slow dancing. Followed by fuming from my mother-in-law after we cut it short. Terrible feedback from trying to play the track on the mic from the phone speaker. It just completely deflated the beautiful moment from my brother's singing. At least I'm happy to say we're still going strong and have been married for 10 years now. It should go without saying that little poop nugget of singing was not included in our wedding video. Imagine not refusing to go sing in this situation. The mother-in-law must have threatened the second cousin with something real good. The groomsmen prepared a skit in which they lost the groom at the reception and proceeded with over-the-top, hands-on-hips, one guy saying in the fakest cartoony voice, "Hey, aren't we missing something? It can't be me because I'm always prepared." Winks and pauses for laughs. "What about your bow tie?" "Oh no!" Produces tie, puts it on, waits for audience reaction. "No, wait. It's the groom. Where could he possibly be?" Acting like some high school musical crap. None of the guests were prepared and silently fussed around with their drinks and silverware. This went on for a bit. I don't remember it at all because I was on my phone, not really doing anything but avoiding eye contact every time they said a line and desperately scanned across the audience. When the whole thing ended, they anticipated like a standing ovation, but it went over the heads of everyone. A lone voice muttered, "Well, that was kinda weird," and the thespians made their exit quietly. The groom came out through the door when he was cued shortly afterwards. I don't think he knew about the skit. Thank God he wasn't there to see it unfold. As for the crowd, who isn't going to clap and whistle when the newlyweds show up at a wedding, so it was all good. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Oh, friends of friends. Young, uber-Christian, small-town naive girl meets married, much older man with 2 kids. Falls in love, and he does eventually leave his wife.
doesn't want any custody. The wedding was her hometown church. His vows were over the top about how he's never felt love before, she's the only woman he ever wanted to marry, he's been so lonely his whole life, he's literally sobbing through it all. Her turn to say her vows, and she's standing there saying nothing for at least 3 beats. Then she's handed a microphone and the piano starts playing. She's made up her own song, which are her vows. After the ceremony, we adjourn to the church basement for the alcohol-free reception, and I'm somehow roped into serving the groom's cake. It's 2 NASCAR car cakes made with an edible photo draped over the cake shapes and is impossible to cut through without mangling the cake, so I have to peel that photo off. My friend is cutting the bride's cake, and it's a full inch or more of fondant on top of plain cake. No frosting. The buffet was potluck from her family. Food you'd expect at a kid's party. Pink punch was the only thing to drink. No dancing because of her religion. Then they left in a 2-horse-drawn carriage for their honeymoon at the town's only hotel, which was like a Motel 6-level dump. Dated a girl in my 20s and went to her friend's wedding in upstate New York. In the middle of the service, the minister's cell phone rang, and he answered it. It was God. God wanted to talk to the groom. The conversation lasted a couple of minutes, and then the ceremony continued. Instead of throwing rice or confetti or just sprinkles or anything like that, the bride and the groom asked their friends to save all their empty Yule pods and throw those as they walked down the aisle. The friends obliged. Please chuck garbage at us as we leave the church. Sure sets the tone for the marriage. At the beginning of the reception, we all had to stand up and sing the national anthem. To be clear, this was another country I'd never been to a wedding in before, so I thought, okay, maybe this is just a tradition I've never heard of before. Then I told this to other people and they were all like, no, it's just really weird. Also, at that wedding, the father of the groom ended his speech with what I'm sure he thought was an amazing joke on how it's easier to build a bridge to Hawaii than to understand what a woman is thinking. It would have been awkward enough had the man also not been standing between his ex and current wife as he was delivering it. I was at a wedding when I was 8, and instead of the bride and groom getting up to make their speech thanking everyone, they'd done it like an awards show. So the DJ opened an envelope, announced their names, and they were handed an awards statue, a Barbie and Ken doll, and proceeded to thank everyone in the form of an awards speech. In the right hands, it might have been funny, but the bride and groom are incredibly shy by nature, so it was just awkward. I'm in my 30s now, and I still remember this. My wife and I don't dance, so we hadn't danced together before our wedding dance. Loved it, but it was probably cringeworthy from the outside. I know a guy who recently made his lackeys, friends, compete to be his best man. The most pretentious thing I've ever seen. Watching them grovel was so upsetting to me. If it's just to get out of the agony of that decision, I could maybe understand. But then again, this implies that they're giving him gifts or doing things to demonstrate their friendship, which is honestly just a gross thing to do to your friends. If someone announced this, I'd probably just tell them that I'd see them at the wedding and enjoy not having to come up with a speech for the absolute idiot. I went to a wedding once where they did a potluck. I guess it's okay depending on the type of wedding, but the reception was at a fairly nice venue, the wedding couple was like an hour and a half late, and the best man didn't have a speech ready to go, so it went on for a very painful 15 to 25 minutes. Also stating in there that they're going to have great bedroom fun times now that they're married. This was a devout Christian wedding with many of the friends, including me, from the church. By the time we got back to the table to eat, I was lucky if I'd got something that was kept warm in a crock pot, but everything else was room temperature. We were able to go home between the ceremony and the reception, but I bet most of the food had been sitting in people's cars since that morning. Oh, and also, the church that she moved to did the whole no kissing before marriage thing, and she started making out with her new husband on the altar to the point where the pastor had to say, "Okay, that's enough." The whole thing was weird. Bride entered to Braveheart soundtrack blasting on a boombox. The civil service that lasted a few minutes started at around 1 p.m. She leaves to the same blasting Braveheart soundtrack. The mother announces that the reception starts at 5:30 p.m. There's no food and no bar, but trays of dessert bars that will be served. We're also told the venue is locked until then, so there's no place to wait. My girlfriend and I left with a crowd of people to across the street at an Irish pub for drinks. A bit of a party breaks out. We all get told to knock it off and come back and wait at the venue in the hall. So we sit on the hall on the carpet for a few hours without drinks or dinner. Bride and groom arrive and enter the venue to an honor guard of floor hockey players wearing hockey jerseys and holding sticks above their heads like swords at a royal wedding. More Braveheart music, of course. The place emptied out pretty quickly as people either left to go back to the pub or to the fast food place a bit further away. Our dinner was lemon squares and a can of Coke from a vending machine in the lobby. Funny stuff. It's a tie between my sister breaking her knee at her own wedding dancing to the Cotton-Eyed Joe, and my sister having her reception at an honest-to-God truck stop while 6 months pregnant. In her defense, the food was good, but wow, was it weird walking through a gas station in formal wear. For some unknown reason, she'd latched onto this weird truck stop restaurant that my family goes to sometimes for late dinners, since it's open 24 hours. The food was buffet style, fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and salad. We did have a private room, which was very weird that it existed. The only way to get into the restaurant is to walk through the attached gas station. It felt very redneck, considering how non-redneck my stepsister typically is. I officiated that wedding though, so I guess I can't judge too harshly. My friend's wedding. The bride wanted to sing him a song, so she did a kind of karaoke thing. There's bad singing, and then there's whatever the hell that was. It was so awkward. Also, dude asked a professional photographer friend of ours to photograph the wedding about a year before. Got a super non-committal answer, never followed up, and was shocked that the photographer didn't show up, after he specifically declined the invitation because he was going to be in another country. Had the entire set of groomsmen rent ridiculously expensive tuxedos, which, fine, cool, happy to be here. He's having his tux custom-tailored and asks for something ridiculous and gaudy, but when quoted the price, says he can't swing that and insists they do it for about a quarter of that price. They do their best to meet the specifications within the given price range, but it's bad. Really bad. So the groomsmen look amazing and he looks like a clown that didn't put on his makeup. Has another friend make a custom batch of mead for the toasts, but rents a hall that doesn't allow outside alcohol, so it can't be used for the toast during the reception. It was probably the cringiest thing I've ever seen. Not just the cringiest wedding or even cringiest thing at a wedding. The cringiest thing, period. The minister or pastor used to date the bride and gushed about how wonderful she was. Told the groom that if he ever died, not to worry, he'd take care of her. I was shell-shocked. I so wished I could think of a reason to ask the couple for a copy of the video of their wedding, but I couldn't quite find a legit one. Probably my cousin's wedding. The food was really bad, and I mean really bad. Things that were supposed to be warm or hot were ice cold and completely undercooked. There was music, but no one was allowed to dance because we don't want people to dance on our wedding. There was also no alcohol. Not a single drop. But the worst thing was the seating arrangement. They didn't plan on families or friends sitting together. I don't know what they were thinking. I was sitting on a table with complete strangers. They even separated our grandparents from one another. After an hour, my grandmother stood up, walked over to my grandfather, and both declared that they were leaving now to the restaurant down the road in order to have something good to eat and a beer. I joined them as well as my parents. It didn't take long for people to notice that our seats were empty. Really easy to figure out since no one was allowed to dance or walk around in general. We got a call from one of my uncles asking where we were at. After we explained why we left, he said, "You know what? You're right. This is bullcrap." And we ended up with like 20 guests from the wedding in that small restaurant having a fun evening. I still don't know why they even bothered celebrating their wedding. They also never invited us again. And that's actually a good thing because now I don't need to find an excuse as to why I can't join their future, quote, parties. Okay, so as soon as the bride and groom went out to the church, everyone went to go congratulate them and give gifts, which are usually flowers or alcohol and envelopes. The bride had a pen and a notebook, and she signed each envelope or wrote in a notebook if someone didn't give her an envelope. Later, as we went to the restaurant where the party was about to start, we waited for 2 hours for the pair. Turns out they made a stop during their ride to count the money. As they finally got to the party, they started complaining that they didn't make enough to pay for the party expenses and earn more. They only spent time with the rich part of the family. The poor tables didn't get the good cakes and food. There was literally different food on some tables. I sat near our poor part of the family. No meat or cakes made it to their table. Me and like 7 other people didn't get forks, only spoons. Why would you give forks to someone when there's only soup for them to eat, right? Now, mind you, I gave them enough to pay for like 5 plates per person, and I helped them during preparations. I even baked a few cakes that I didn't get to eat in the end. Half of the people got out after like 20 minutes.
The bride called them all terrible for ruining her dream wedding. It was the worst wedding ever, and that's just a part of the whole wedding mess. I wish I'd had a car back then so I could go back home as well, as the wedding was terrible for many other reasons. The groom was cheap, and the bride was a Karen to be. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.